1.
Facilitate efficient meetings where we can listen, digest, and address the concerns, ideas, and proposals being presented for consideration. Please help reduce distractions in this meeting by putting your phone on silent. In this room, we use the overhead microphones. So if you talk out there, you're just as accessible to the general public on YouTube as us talking up here. So be careful.
And the mics are very sensitive, so whispers get picked up too.
If you need to step outside, you're more than welcome to. There's bathrooms around the back, and if you need to take a call or have a conversation. We welcome all the RAC members that made it today. I know it's a busy time of year, and we appreciate you being here. Let's have everybody introduce themselves here in the room and where you're from and what constituent you represent.
Berlin King from Bicknell, represent agriculture.
Russ Gardner, I'm from Enterprise. I represent the Farm Bureau.
Mike Grant, Annabella, represent the sportsman.
Chuck Chamberlain from Cedar City, represent the Forest Service.
Rachel Bullis, Cedar City, non-consumptive.
Thank you. That's everybody here in the room. We have a few RAC members joining us online. We'll go to Chad and then Brooklyn.
Chad Utley, St. George, public at large.
Brooklyn Cox, BLM, Cedar City.
Thank you, Brooklyn and Chad. Bart.
Bart Batista, Kanab, non-consumptive.
Thanks, Bart. And Riley.
Riley Roberts, Tropic, Utah, sportsman.
Thanks, Riley. I'm Austin Atkinson from Cedar City, representing public at large. I'll be the chair of tonight's meeting. Also joining us online, we have two wildlife board members, Kent Johnson and Gary Nielsen. Thank you guys for joining us this evening, listening in. And we have Ms. Paula Richmond here in person in the room. So thank you, board member, for being here. It's a busy time of year for you too. Welcome all of you public that are here in person or watching on YouTube. If you are here, you'll have a chance to provide comments. If you want to do that, you have to fill out that comment card and then we'll know when to call you. Those watching on YouTube should have already submitted their comments previously as they reviewed the presentations. We will not be providing the full presentations tonight, but we do have the experts here to present on their topic and answer any questions. So I think that's it. With that introduction, I will call for an approval of the agenda and minutes from our last meeting. Any discussion needed that on the RAC?
I'll move to approve the agenda and minutes.
Motion made by Verlin.
I'll second it.
Second by Mike. All those in favor here? Again. Here. We're got a hand up from Chad, Riley, thumbs up from Bart, and a thumbs up from Brooklyn. Thank you. That's unanimous. Appreciate you. Try to work with technology the best we can. Okay, agenda item number 3 for tonight. We're going to talk about the wildlife board meeting. This board meeting happened last week in Farmington, December 12th. This was a big one. If you haven't watched it online, you're missing out. But I'll go through some of the items and let you know how they were voted upon and how they affect us down here. The statewide mule deer plan. There was a motion made to allow the division to adjust deer permit numbers up to 20% increase or decrease without going through the public process. That was originally proposed as a 30% grace, generalization. I don't know what you would call that, grace area where they could increase. It was voted for 20% as a hard cap. So they could, without bringing permit numbers for deer to the April meeting, the division will be able to adjust those permit numbers automatically to manage within the plan with a 20% window up or down. The second motion there was to pass the remainder of the statewide mule deer plan as presented, and that passed 4-1. The next topic was the mule deer hunt structure and research proposal. This had 4 motions, I should say. The first motion was to approve the point restriction. That's the 4-point antler point restriction on the Pine Valley unit, with the exception that youth hunters would have to follow the restriction as well. That motion failed 2-3. And there was a follow-up motion that says, let's approve the point restrictions on Pine Valley as presented, where the youth would be exempt. Everybody else had to shoot a 4-point or better. That motion also failed 2-3. Then there was a unanimous motion to pass the weapons restricted units as presented by the division. That would be the Thousand Lakes unit, which is now limited entry, the Cache unit, the Boulder unit, and the Beaver West unit, just over the hill here. And those would have restricted weapons only for general deer, and that did pass unanimously. Big change there. The final motion on this topic was to approve the remainder of the proposals in the mule deer hunt structure research, with the exception of the antler point restriction on the Pine Valley as presented. That passed unanimously. So there's a lot there, but the restricted weapon hunts are new on those 4 units, and there is no antler point restriction on the Pine Valley, at least for this year. Got it. Sound coach with everybody who listened in with that. It's a little bit of a complicated one. The next item was the buck and bull hunt tables for all hunts coming up. And this is for a 3-year hunt structure. So the season dates are now set in a 3-year increment, starting in 2025 through 2027. First motion was made to change the Paunsaugunt limited entry hunts to overlap the management and premium archery hunts, overlap the management muzzleloader premium and management hunts. I'm using the word management right here. Basically, the management hunts and the limited entry hunts or premium limited entry hunts will now align. And they used to delay the management hunts a few days on archery and muzzleloader. They will now match, and then they will keep the cactus and the management deer hunt to have the same season dates, and that'll start the 1st of November and go through November 20th. So it used to go the premium and illegal weapon deer hunt on the Paunsaugunt would end on October 31st, and then they would do the management hunt and then the cactus buck hunt. Now the management and the cactus buck hunts will be combined beginning on November 1st.
Austin, and that matches what the Southern Region passed, and it was a proposal that came to us from through the RAC process.
That's correct.
So
that motion passed unanimously. The second one was made to change the 3 Corners elk hunt. That's in the northeastern region. Change the hunt structure to be the same time frame and structure as other hunts, adding an early any legal weapon rifle hunt and adjusting muzzleloader season. That passed unanimous. And there was another motion, the last one, was to accept the remainder of the hunt season dates as presented with the exclusion of the Fillmore Oak Creek. The proposal was to split the Oak Creek rifle hunt into 2 rifle deer hunts under limited entry. And they voted no, keep it as 1 any legal weapon hunt. So those hunt dates are set for the next 3 years. They still have a chance to change those in future years when November comes up. but basically those 3 years of seasons and hunt structures have been set through 2027. And those dates are available in the RAC packet. You can look forward and see how the dates roll with the calendar going years forward. Agenda item number 6 was the once in a lifetime hunt tables and dates. Same thing, 3-year hunt structure. The first motion was made to ask the division to work on a memorandum of understanding with state parks, mainly in regard to Antelope Island. And if there are only 2 tags for sheep or for deer, that they would alternate between who gets to go first, meaning hunting first, the auction permit versus the public permit. Also, the division should work on a deal for the split of the sale, the proceeds of those conservation permits. That was placed on the action log, and that was unanimous. The second motion there was to give the division authority to turn off or on hunts for non-residents. For example, if there is a die-off or other significant changes. So where they're setting hunts based on a 3-year structure, they wanted to give the division some flexibility there to create hunts or bring them back based on the needs of that hunt. That passed unanimous. The next motion was to ask state parks to provide an audit of the funds from the sale of the Antelope Island conservation permits. That also passed unanimous. Then there was a motion made to accept the revised dates for the public draw for once in a lifetime and approve all others as presented. And that had to do with most of the sheep dates that we had talked about in this RAC. Do you move them to December 31st? Do you roll them back earlier to match them up? So that passed unanimous. And the following motion, the last motion, was to ask the division starting in 2026 to look at moving the conservation season dates in line with the public dates. So there's hope that after 2025 and the dust settles, that we can get some fairness on those dates between conservation sheep permits and public draw permits. So that ended the hunts. Then we go agenda item number 7. This is the general season dedicated hunter applications and youth allocations. This was mainly a licensing change. First motion was to reject the division's proposal to give an extra preference point for first-time youth hunters going into their first-year drop. That passes 4-1. So youth hunters applying the first time will not receive an extra preference point in the general deer drop. The second motion made was to accept the remainder of the division's proposal as presented, and that passed unanimously. The big implication there is starting next year, 2025, you will no longer be able to apply for dedicated hunter and for general deer. You'll have to pick one or the other. You won't be able to apply for points in one or apply for both of them. You have to now pick. CWMU renewals. There was one motion made, and that was to accept the division's proposal as presented, with the exception of allowing JB Ranch to enroll in the CWMU program. So they heard that proposal, if you will, and they chose to allow JB Ranch, which is in the southeastern region, to become a CWMU starting this year. Agenda item number 9 was the Antelope Island Conservation Permit Program. This came up because there is now a huntable population of Rocky Mountain sheep on Antelope Island. And the proposal was made to add the Antelope Island Conservation Permit to this 3-year cycle. Now adding that sheep permit, and that passed unanimous. And then the last motion of the day was to accept the rule amendments as presented for the residency amendments. That was just some cleanup language. As far as I understand it, it has to do with the day you apply in the draw, you must be a resident. Before, you had to be a resident on the drawing day or May 15th. Now you just must meet residency requirements on the day that you apply in the draw. So probably not a big change for most of us in here, but residency is a sensitive thing when you're looking at where you're applying. So that's my report from the wildlife board meeting. That was a good one. Any questions from the RAC on something I might have missed? Or?
Yeah, question.
Yeah.
What was the rationale for not approving 1 point for the youth?
The one point for the youth, there's a lot of discussion similar to what we had here with Lindy. If I remember right, it was brought up that if we just add a point to all those youth hunters, it kind of messes up the guys who are second year youth hunters, because now they're equal to the new guys, and then everybody else falls now a year behind that group. So it gives favor to 1 year class of youth applying and doesn't really help everybody else. If it was a one and done, we could give them all permits and take them out of the pool. It may have worked, but it's just helping a portion of them and kind of inflating it unjustly across the youth. So it was debated, but not fair. So they said no, come up with something better. Any other questions? Okay. All right, we'll move on to our regional update from our regional supervisor.
Yeah, and I'm kind of sequestered myself from the rest of the group because I started feeling the effects of a cold yesterday. So I'm trying to not share that, and hopefully I can do that successfully. And Adam, I'm gonna watch it on my screen here, and then if you'll just advance stuff, so I'm not, as we can. So first of all, let me give Adam credit for that beautiful picture that we started with. I think that's one of yours, isn't it?
Yes, thank you.
From our wildlife section, this is probably the busiest time of year for our wildlife section because of especially the big game. For those that are involved with big game, they have mule deer classifications going on, which is probably the most important data that we collect, because it drives what we propose for permits in the spring. And so usually the biologists are spending, well, not usually, they're all spending multiple days and classifying many hundreds, if not thousands of deer on the units to get good data for that. And they spend lots of hours. And in the middle of that, it's also the busy time of year for all of our captures and collaring. And so I worry about the big game biologists this time of year because they're burning the candle at both ends. And hopefully that's coming to an end. I think, Vance, we wrap up captures Thursday or Friday in the region.
Yeah, we should finish down south with those captures.
And then I hope those guys disappear for a couple of weeks and burn up all the excess time that they've compiled over the last several weeks. So they're wrapping up postseason mule deer classification. Been doing bighorn sheep mule deer and pronghorn collaring projects. Christmas bird counts within our non-game portion of our wildlife section. Continuing to work with the habitat section on WMAs to benefit upland game and wildlife, and then starting turkey trapping. Turkeys have done well the last couple of years. We have more issues this year than we've had in the past. Our best tool for dealing with turkeys in addition to hunts is trapping, and trapping is a lot more successful when we have snow on the ground. And so they're anxiously awaiting some snow so we can get going on turkey trapping and relieve some issues with landowners there. Moving on to our aquatic section. Some of the lakes have good ice on them. Penguich Lake is capped. It's got 4 to 8 inches of ice, and some people doing well fishing through the ice at Penguich. It's hit and miss with the other high elevation lakes in terms of where you have safe ice. So if you're going out, please be careful and make sure you're checking things and the ice depths before you get too far out on those waters. The other low elevation lakes, the lower elevation lakes, if they have ice on them, it's not safe yet. And Fish Lake, even though it's high elevation, it's so deep, it takes a while to cap, and there's not safe ice on Fish Lake yet. It's usually sometime after the first of the year before we have safe ice on Fish Lake. Some of the accomplishments in our aquatic section is that we've added some new species and some diversity around in the region. This is following things that were outlined in management plans that we put together with the public, but just some highlights there. Diversifying the panfish assemblage, and this does 2 things. It provides more forage for the predatory fish and also additional opportunities for anglers. Some examples: we put black crappie in Newcastle, Jackson Flat, Baker Reservoir, Paiute Reservoir, and the Willow Springs Pond, and then white crappie and white bass in Paiute Reservoir. We've added tiger muskie to address some problematic species and increase predation and new angling opportunities in Penguich Lake, Mill Meadows, and Topic reservoirs. We're hoping that helps us stay ahead of some of the less desirable fish species and also and avoid having to do these large rotenone treatments, which really just shut down fishing on a lake for 2 to 3 years, and then really 5 to 6 years before they come back to what they were prior. So that's part of the rationale there. Some really big news with our Washington County field office. This is working mostly on the endangered fish species down in Washington County. They just received a large grant that will help the funding down there for the next 4 to 5 years. Been working with Washington County on the picture of this. This is a barrier that's in the Virgin River Gorge. Its sole purpose is to not allow red shiners, which are a really invasive fish species, to come up into through the Virgin River Gorge up into Utah, and they would really decimate our native fish populations if they return. We worked really hard to get them out of Utah and are trying to keep it that way. Some drone flights going on down there to look at some habitat, both terrestrial and in the river, and then having some success with some riparian river restoration down there in Washington County along the Virgin River, and you can see some pictures of those efforts there. Moving on to our habitat section. The next few weeks is really busy for both our habitat folks and all of our federal partners. All of the WRI project proposals are due January 10th, and so there's a lot of partner meetings and planning going on right now to get projects submitted and written. We've been doing some fall sagebrush planting with over 360,000 plants put in the ground, which could be really beneficial for wildlife in the future. Lots of other restoration projects, and I'll highlight a couple of them here. I've mentioned the Northern Corridor EIS down in Washington County. There'll be a lot of effort with the new administration to try to bring that to a more reasonable conclusion. And then SR 18, which is the road from Enterprise down to Dameron Valley. It's an area where we have a lot of vehicle collisions with deer. Trying some new things there. We've had a big study going on with UDOT and hoping we can reduce the number of deer getting killed on the road there. Just to highlight a couple of the habitat projects, the Last Chance, Lop and Scatter, over 1,800 acres on BLM and Sitla and some private property. We're trying to maintain historic chaining there and encourage browse and species that are beneficial to deer and other wildlife. And then on our Fillmore WMA, we put in a couple of miles of pipeline with the installation of some new watering facilities into Youngsfield and Pioneer WMAs. Put in almost a couple of miles of fence, or 1.5 miles of fence on the Halfway Hill WMA, and we've installed some 60-foot cattle guards to try to keep deer from getting in areas where we don't want them and trespass cattle off. And those have been in partnerships with BLM, livestock committees, and sportsman groups. Our outreach section, since our last meeting, we had our youth and beginner pheasant hunts. They all went very well and well attended, and most importantly, were safe. We had our first ever raptor education night that was well attended and popular over in Cedar City, and then with several events upcoming. There'll be some bald eagle viewing event January 10th. There's hunter education workshops at the end of January and first part of February. For a new viewing event at Jackson Flat Reservoir that's focused on waterfowl, and then of course the Snow Goose Festival will be occurring in Delta February 21st and 22nd. And if you've never experienced that, it's worth experiencing. So that's all I have. I'd be happy to respond to any questions from the RAC.
Thanks, Kevin.
I got one question, Kevin. Yeah, I've been hit a couple times on the Fish Lake bubblers. When they've shut the bubblers off at the marinas at Fish Lake and allowed them to cap over where there's still usable water to fish up there from a boat. You know what the stipulation is on that, when Gary's to shut those off?
No, but I will send a text and see if I can get a response and have an answer for you.
Okay.
I don't know. what-
It's capped over now. The guys are having to go to Willow Bottoms and over to Joe Bush, but there's perfect amount of water to fish on still. It hasn't came all the way up to the marina. The ice is starting
But
up
the
there.
so the marinas are capped, but the outside of them not, and they've turned the bubbles off inside. Okay, let me see if I can get an answer for you on that, Mike. I don't know that off the top of my head.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any questions? Thanks. We're gonna move on to agenda item number 5. This is waterfowl recommendations for a 3-year cycle, 2025-2027. Mr. Jason Jones here in person.
Good evening, good to hear.
Thank you. Any clarifications needed for us or open for questions?
I'm open for questions. I think everything's well covered in the presentation, so.
Thank you, appreciate that. Any questions for Mr. Jones?
I have one that doesn't pertain to the study or somehow we can look into it. Primarily Sevier Valley, some of the southern region has started picking up a lot of sandhill cranes. Is there a way that the division can go and talk with the federal waterfowl? They set that stipulation, right?
So I'm on the study committee. I represent Utah on the flyway, and then the Fish and Wildlife sets the frameworks for our hunting seasons. And what it really boils down to is there's 2 species of sandhill cranes, and one has allowable hunting, and that's the Rocky Mountain population that's at least thought to migrate through northern Utah where we have tags, and then the lower Colorado River Valley population, they don't allow any hunting of that population. So either that management plan changes and they allow some hunting, or the DWR can prove that some of the birds down here are actually Rocky Mountain population cranes. And we're working to put transmitters on cranes, which is a little harder than you would think. But right now, we're not going to be able to get a hunt down here, but we're working on it.
I don't think these cranes leave the valley ever.
Yeah, well, I mean, we need to see where they're wintering. Are they wintering the Rocky Mountain population, or are they part of the lower Colorado River Valley population? But right now, the Fish and Wildlife is only going to let us have those hunts in Box Elder, Cache Rich, and Uinta counties.
Okay.
But I hope that could change in the future.
Yeah, there's a pile of them here.
Right. We do have a policy where we have some direction we can give landowners. And we can even direct them to Fish and Wildlife Region 6 where they get some depredation permits. But there are some things you can do to get sandhill cranes off your property, or save your grains. You can plant avapel. We have a whole policy, and regional depredation staff can help you with that, and they can reach out to me on any questions answered. So.
So was there genetic difference between these 2 cranes, or just where they live?
It's one of these small populations of cranes that differ from another population of cranes, and they're concerned about this species of cranes that is distinctly defined as the lower Colorado River Valley population of cranes. And they have separate management plans and separate objectives. And one allows hunting because the cranes are, population is really robust, and this other distinct population that's recognized isn't robust, and they don't allow any hunting. So how genetically different they are, I'm not sure, but I know they're distinct populations. U.S. Fish and Wildlife is defined in that way.
So you can't find one down here and take DNA and compare it up there, and what separates them? Just where we think they live, or what?
I'd have to get back with you on more information on, what defines more the populations. I mean, it's kind of like the trumper slumps, where they have a distinct population they've defined in Yellowstone, and another population they've defined in the Rocky Mountain population, and there's no genetic difference of those populations. So I think it's probably just historical breeding and nesting colonies of cranes that migrate and live in separate locations, and they've been defined separately.
Okay, well, like he said, they're getting to be a lot down here.
I understand.
Problem.
Susan, I have a question about the swan hunt. Do you have any preliminary reports how that went, overall numbers, how many critters were taken?
So it's early for me to get you guys numbers on how many tundra swans were taken. I can say it's over 925 and it'll probably end up somewhere around 950, I would guess, 960. It's early for me to speculate on that. I haven't looked at the numbers, but the trumpeter swans, it was just like last year. It heated up really fast the first week of November, and I'm getting kind of scared, right? Just like last year. And 8 trumpeter swans were taken just like that, and then it just cooled off, and that's the exact same thing happened last year. And most folks self-reported or came into a check station and staff,
So the hunt stayed open the whole.
The hunt stayed open the whole time. The first week in November, 8 trumpeter swans were taken, about the space of 8 or 9 days. And that's another issue we're actively working on with the flyway. There is hope on the horizon that we can see some change there. So we're actively working on that. Fish and Wildlife has acknowledged that the environmental assessment that kind of guides our hunt stale. And we do know that we have to really wait for peer-reviewed results to push changes. We let them know we want to make changes, but I've had a meeting with the researcher that is doing this isotope analysis, so I know that the 40 swans that we turned into the USGS, 38 of them are part of that Rocky Mountain population, which is a big, robust population of swans. And for reference, our quota is based on the U.S. breeding segment, which is only 600 birds, and that's a really small population to have the quota based on. And same for Nevada, their quota is based on those same birds, but it's looking like the trumpeter swans that are here are not from that population, which is good for us. But it takes time to make changes at fly level. So we're hoping to make a change in the future.
Any other questions? Questions from the public? Any questions for Mr. Kevin? Okay. Kevin, can we summarize online public comment?
Yeah. So there were only two people that commented. One was strongly in favor and one was neutral. The only written comment really wasn't relevant to this region, so maybe I'll ask Jason. It was a comment about ADA accessible blinds on Utah Lake.
I mean, that's hard because everybody here knows that our properties are bought for wildlife management and they're not parks. Because we can't really manage them like a park. But that being said, Salt Creek and Public Shooting Grounds and Farmington Bay all manage disabled blinds. Farmington Bay manages a disabled blind, our reservation, which is quite a workload on us. Most of our walk-through gates are 42 inches and ADA compliant is 32 inches. They don't allow some of these new technologies like these power chairs and stuff, but on our wetlands, you can imagine it's different. It's difficult to accommodate requests for cement bottomed blinds at a great hunting location. You're talking about money, permits from the Army Corps of Engineers. We're going to put these blinds when the Utah Lake or Great Salt Lake or wetlands are fluctuating. So it's kind of a difficult situation. Rich Hansen at Ogden Bay is taken for personal phone calls because he put in a gate with a lock on it for disabled folks to access. So we're doing what we can. And I talked to Dave Lee down at Utah Lake. He's open if there's an opportunity and money in the right location, but it's more difficult than you would think to provide some of the amenities folks might be used to having, let's say, a park on a property that was purchased for wildlife management. That's as you can imagine, so many of our properties are very primitive. So,
Jason, I don't know if you read the comments. It was specific to Utah Lake and if there's an opportunity to partner. I think what you're saying is if we have an opportunity to do something, we will. If we have
the right opportunity and the right partnership, but that comment is requesting online. You can pull up to offload a type of chair on a cement bottom blind in a prime hunting location. And that's a difficult thing to achieve on wetlands.
I just didn't know how much familiarity there'd be down here, so I thought I'd just ask you to comment on that one. That was the only. Mr. Chair, that was the only comment that was on this topic, so.
Yeah, we're certainly open when the right opportunity, and like I said, we're doing what we can. When I managed Farmington Bay, that line that we manage by reservation is incredibly popular, and I mean, it takes a lot of staff time because we're getting calls on it daily. And that blind happened, we happened to find a great location for it, where we didn't have to fill wetlands, and we could put it next to a pond, and we could make it so folks could drive their vehicle up to it, but those opportunities don't present themselves all the time in our waterfowl management areas.
We do not have any public comment cards for this agenda item. If you have a comment for a future agenda item, put your name on it, put the agenda item number. And then the gentleman in the back will get it up there and make sure we take care of it.
Darren, if you'll collect them and bring them up, Sean, excuse me. Took a shot, missed.
Okay, so no public comment on this agenda item, so
Looks like there's a couple here in the.
we'll open up the RAC discussion on waterfowl recommendations. Any RAC discussion here out there? Online? You guys are making this easy. Guess we'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve as presented.
Mike makes a motion to approve waterfowl recommendations as presented. Second by Chuck. Ready for a vote? All those here signify with hand. Unanimous here. Chad, Bart, Riley, hand up. Brooklyn, do you have a vote on this agenda item? Hands up. Unanimous. Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, we'll move on to number 6. Reporting requirement recommendations.
Right. This is a quick recommendation that just makes reporting requirements easier for falconers. So I'm happy to clarify if you're not familiar.
Any questions from RAC members? Questions from the public? All right, do we have public comments on this one?
There was one person that commented, but it wasn't very helpful because they were neutral on it. They either agreed or disagreed.
Perfect. It might be like me and not so familiar with the sport.
Pretty specialized.
Yeah, it is. Okay, that's one. Yeah.
I mean, how many falconers do we have in the state?
They kind of ebbs and flows, but right now the number is, and it's sometimes hard to gauge, but it's around 220 to 230.
So do you have any concerns about the birds? If they take birds from us in the state of Utah? Or
There's certainly concerns, but the Fish and Wildlife allows folks to participate in falconry, and the Division of Wildlife administers that program, and they can get a COR to participate in falconry. They can get a raptor capture permit and take birds from the wild. I mean, certainly we have, concerns here and there, but folks are allowed to participate in falconry, and we are charged with overseeing that program, and so we do so.
This is a question. Do they have a season structure where they can go out and, or is it just open year round?
So if, as part of my waterfowl recommendations, I presented the falconry season dates too, and they largely mirror the season dates for waterfowl and dove and other things. They have a more limited take, like they can take 3 ducks, like waterfowl hunter can take 7. But they're for the most part, sometimes they'll have extended seasons and such, but their seasons for the most part mirror other seasons.
Okay, no public comment on this agenda item. RAC discussion needed?
I just have one comment that I think I need to put forward. In the Forest Service, we protect goshawks pretty heavily, and to the extent that we do a lot of timber harvest around the nest, and then we'll find out that a falconer has come in and taken the young off that nest, and we told the lumber company they can't harvest the lumber there because of that, and then find out. So we've had a little bit of difficulty with northern goshawk or American goshawk.
Again, Fish and Wildlife sets the number that they can take from the nest, and then, they apply through a draw through DWR, and we issue them that permit when they're eligible, when they draw on Fish and Wildlife, sets the number of those birds that they can take.
I'm familiar with that. We just, you get two wildlife dollars, you get a little
Yeah.
uptight after they work all summer and then find out.
Right. I totally understand.
And you got some guy pointing his finger in your chest saying, I could have had that one here and I didn't get it.
And absolutely, there's concerns, and, our law enforcement also works hard on falconry related issues, just like they do other issues.
So maybe a question is, from Chuck's comment, is there a way of where there's forestry permitted if we look and know there's goshawks in there and those forestry permitted, do we withhold the falconry from going into those areas? Put a unit boundary on those areas where one can't take, then he waits all summer for the forestry, then the sportsman goes in there and pulls the goshawk out. It's public lands, it's public. Do we hold that out so the forestry guys aren't upset? Or do we tell them, look, the falconry is gonna go in there, and that maybe that's the Forest Service deal?
Yeah, we don't know that. We don't know they're coming, and we're not super concerned about the number of birds. We have pretty healthy goshawk populations, but it's just part of our regulations. So
Administratively, it's an awkward look.
it's just hard to say, you can't, we don't want you in there, and you think, but I don't know what the answer is right now. We're not super concerned. It's a difficult situation for us.
I'll entertain a motion on this agenda item. Let's make that.
A motion that we accept is proposed.
Motion by Chuck to accept as proposed. Second? Second by Russ. Those in favor here? Unanimous here in the room. Hands up from Riley, Chad, Brooklyn, and Clark. Unanimous to accept falconry reporting as proposed. Thank you. I appreciate it. All right, we'll move on to agenda item number 7. Darren, DeBloois, Utah Black Bear Management Plan Revision and Rule. Welcome, Darren, to the party.
Thank you. I only have one update.
Okay.
We had a typo in the RAC packet. One chart showed the NEBO had 25. We're recommending 25 bear permits. Other chart said 36. One was 26, the other was 36. That should be 36. Other than that, I'm happy to answer any questions about the presentation or any other questions that folks might have.
Any questions from the RAC? Mr. Black Bear here. I have a question. Tell me on the, I apologize for some of my ignorance. I'm not a houndsman, but the Memorial Day weekend is a big weekend.
Right.
Where you settled on the dates, does that answer, what group does that answer, and is it right?
We had a couple of goals with the bear committee. One was Memorial Day weekend was a big deal. And so the compromise, we wanted to get bait out of the field at the same time the hounds are hunting because it's illegal to chase off of a bait. And if baits aren't in the field, then that is less likely to happen. The compromise in the group was to allow that Monday, Memorial Day, to be an overlap day. And that day is when baits can start being put into the field. And that's the last day that hounds can hunt the spring. So there is 1 day overlap, but technically, bears aren't going to be coming into baits if they're getting put out into the field that day. And so we felt like that was something that we could compromise on.
Okay.
Does that help?
Both sides are
happy at the moment. Yeah.
Okay, and the 3-year season dates are going to match with that one.
Right, yeah, so it'll follow that. We'll adjust those annually for the calendar, but it will always be a Memorial Day overlap for that spring and summer hunt split.
Okay. That answers that, Chuck.
I had a question about the baiting. I know we're proposing to allow metal canisters up to 55 gallons. And I think I read in the regulation they had to be fastened, or I can't remember.
They do, they have to be fastened at the site, and then they have to be removed within 72 hours of harvest.
Did we specify how they fasten them, or just?
No, no, typically they'll chain them into a tree, or some other non-mobile, object. That's typically how it's done where it's allowed in Idaho.
To clarify on that, it does say fasten, but it doesn't say with a ratchet strap, a cord
Doesn't
strap.
say so,
Okay.
no.
And there can be a lid on it, and there's no opening size specified or anything on it, right?
We actually mirrored some other states' language, Idaho specifically on how they did that, so people that may hunt multiple states kind of know the drill. And it's not mandatory, it's voluntary. So I think it will help clean up some of these bait sites, contain the bait. Guys may not have to take bait often because it's not getting spread all over. It might make it easier to clean up too after the fact.
Any other questions? The bait tag or identification, that would change for the bait site, correct?
No, they still need to, within 10 feet, mark the bait. We have had some discussion with the Forest Service folks in the first 2 racks about also including a marker on the canister itself that contains their COR number for the bait site. And that is something that the Forest Service at the regional level would like to see. So we're certainly open to making some tweaks. One thing that we say in the rule, and the current red line, is that they have to follow the regulations of either the landowner or the land management agency that oversees that property. And so we can put something in the guidebook that says if you're going to do this on Forest Service lands, here are the stipulations, or we could put something in the rule that does that. So their concerns were marking the canister and then maybe a half a mile around established trailheads and expanding that list a little bit beyond what we have. Right now it says a dwelling or somewhere that people are using. It's not quite as precise in our language as what the forest would like to see. So there's probably more than one way to handle that. We certainly could put it in the guidebook to say, this is what the Forest Service requires. If you do it this way, you don't have to get a special use permit. The forest has agreed that will suffice. So that'd be one way to tackle it.
Would you agree that it would be better to come from DWR rather than?
Yeah, I think so. It reduces the steps that a person needs to take out. If we can let people know this is what to expect, the forest says we're okay with the regulation, and if you'll stipulate this, and people know, then we don't require them to come to us and ask for permission like they might have to with a private landowner. And I think that makes it better for hunters. It's just as long as they're following the rules that the forest would like to see, they don't need to go and ask specifically for permission.
In the past, we give them a special use permit, and then they'd have to be permit.
Right, yeah.
And so if they combine the regulations, then they end up doing one thing. And so in the past, we said you have to be half mile from certain campsites, trailheads. And this is just a little, it's not as.
They provided us with some language along those lines. So I think, the Forest Service is land management agency, and obviously I'm comfortable with letting people know what they expect. So I think we can do that one way or the other.
With the canisters, how many bait sites can someone register?
2 at a time.
2 at a time.
Right.
And now we have a canister. If a guy wants to move that whole canister, what does that do for his permit process?
He has to let our law enforcement know he's moving one of his sites and re-register for the new site. So law enforcement is taking over all that, the bait site registration and monitoring. They used to have to, if you remember, contact us or tell us where they wanted the bait site, and then we would approve it. We don't do that anymore. They can just, first come, first serve. They do have to register, and then law will usually follow up, just check, make sure regulations are being followed. They have a list and a map of where all these sites are. So that's how it works. They can only ever have 2 at a time. So if they move one, they've got to shut one down and move it. and clean up the area as well.
Darren, was it ever considered to issue a physical tag, like to affix to it? I've been in Idaho before.
Right.
Your COR is a,
Yeah,
single
they
use
sell you a
tag.
tag, that you can stick on. We've thought about that. I think, they do get, when they register the bait side, they can print out their COR, which is, the document registers the site, and that's what they can use to post. The mechanic, if we require, if the forest wants to require that to be marked on the drum, they have to figure out some way to do that, whether that's a tag or, a stencil or whatever. The thing is, it changes every year, so, you'd have to work that. So we haven't provided anything. The hunters have to figure out how they're gonna do that.
Any other questions? All right. Online, no questions online. Questions from the public for Darren? Do comments in a minute, but any questions?
Yeah, I have one. Do I stand here?
Question, yeah, you can just stand up. and ask
Perfect.
Your question.
So JJ Brewer, you know me, it's kind of a two-part question. If you can help me out. So if you read through the bear recommendations and the bear plan that's currently put in place, there's 3 indicators that move the needle, whether we should increase, decrease bear tags, along with, depredation, a few other things. But specifically in that, as you look, it appears like many of these units, such as the Beaver and the Boulder, are hitting one of those indicators, which is a high sow harvest. Beaver being, I believe it was 43%, Boulder, I believe, being 48%. How many of those units would you say really qualified for a decrease like those, according to the plan that the division has come up with? And me looking, it looks like almost 60% of them should have gotten that decrease. And secondly, knowing that they're not hitting that decrease, they're not getting a decrease in tags, where would you say that push is coming from to not decrease like that?
So there's a couple of things. One is that the first step the biologist has every 3 years is to set a harvest strategy. Boulder, I believe they changed strategies on the Boulder. Let me just double check.
Yeah, it went from moderate to liberal.
Correct. Yep. So when you change strategies, you can adjust permits up to 50%. So they still look at those metrics, but the targets change. So for Boulder, that puts them, they should be less than 25% adult male and between 40 and 45% female. So that's, you got an instance where one is in, the other one's out, and then that gives some flexibility to the biologist. The other part of this is that we've had, we've got some concerns expressed to us from the legislature about predation and specifically conflict. And so one thing that we agreed to do, one of the things that I ask our biologists to look at is if you've got conflict on a particular unit and you have domestic sheep allotments, those should be managed at a more liberal harvest strategy. So the Boulder was one. What was the other one, JJ?
Beaver would be one.
Beaver. So Beaver didn't change, but it was already in the liberal harvest strategy. And again, it looks like actually Beaver was right. 17.5% adult males and should be less than 25, and percent females should have been between 40 and 45, and it was 42.9. So that one falls within the parameters, and then the biologist makes they can adjust those permits between 0 and 7 according to the plan. So ask folks to do that.
So yeah, to follow up with that. So depredation, you're saying the depredation Boulder specifically is the reason it moved from a moderate to liberal.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily that we've seen a lot of depredation. It's the fact that it has sheep allotments, and we want to be careful about having high bear densities on top of sheep producers.
Do you know what that depredation number was this past year on the boulder specifically?
Can look, I think we have it, we probably just have it by county, JJ. We did meet with, we met with some producers down there. It sounds like, they could do a better job of reporting.
The report is 0.
Yeah,
0.
so they told us that they're seeing some, but they haven't called UDAP out to verify. So that's kind of where we are with that unit. So that, you know, as we discussed that tonight, that's certainly something we'll take into account.
Any other questions? All right, we'll summarize public comment. This is agenda item.
Yeah, there were only 2 comments, one somewhat agreed, one strongly agreed. The only specific comment was in favor and was supporting the changes on the fish lake, someone that had it that hunted there a couple of years ago and thought it could support some additional opportunity.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Public comment. This agenda item, I have just 2 comment cards. That doesn't sound right, let me know. I've got JJ first. JJ, if you just want to stand and give your comments where you're at, you'll have 3 minutes. I'll have a great info.
Man, I'm Mr. Popular today. How about that? Thank JJ Brewer's my name. I'm representing Utah Housing Association and myself. Thank you. First of all, thank you for allowing us to be here. Thank you, Southern RAC. I know it's a very thankless, super hard job. Thank you to our biologist. I know many of you know me. I spend a lot of time calling you, and it's really a privilege getting to work with a lot of you as I have in the field. So I do appreciate it. I hope my message comes across as a positive way that I want to work together and hopefully help, you know, in the future. I wrote some of my notes down here, but 5 years ago when I was working closely with the Wildlife Board, as I still do, and I thank them a huge amount, but as I was working with them in the Southern RAC, I was promised individually and as a group when we were going through some of this stuff that no matter what, we would never see any type of wildlife managed outside or not managed without science-based data, that we would never manage something off emotions or politics, that would never happen. But we can see in 5 short years how that's quickly changed. And a good example is mountain lions. Obviously, House Bill 469 came into effect. All science and data went out the window. You can't argue that. And we went war on mountain lions. The public's view or voice was more or less taken away, and it's hard not to feel that we see some of that trend coming in the bear snow, right? I'm all for helping the cattlemen as much as anybody. I sell cars for a living. I sell them guys a lot of vehicles. I want to help our sheepmen, our cattlemen, and we dang sure if we have a problem, we better be there to help them. I hope we're one of the first phone calls, houndsmen. But I think it's a scary, slippery slope as we start to manage wildlife this way. For the past, I wrote this down, for the past 2 years, we've been told over and over that most bear units would recommend that bear tags would decrease. As I said, over 60% of the units this year increased that weren't due for an increase. And we've been told that because they're out of their harvest threshold for multiple years now. Why now are we seeing a big increase when most units, and they're going to liberal harvest when most units haven't met those thresholds? No. So why are we seeing an increase when really most of them should be decreasing? Now, I don't know whose fault it is or who to blame, but let's use Boulder for an example. That depredation was 0. Sevier County and Wayne County did not have a single depredation on record. I don't know whose job that is. You said we're not doing the right job. Regardless, the number is 0. So if we're going off data and science to manage bears, that Boulder Mountain should have got a decrease, the Beaver Mountain, and many more. I only pointed those 2 out because they're right here in our backyard. My message is, again, thank you guys. I want to work together. But I would ask, what message are we sending to all groups by approving a plan that is not based on safe management practices? We're not using the science or the data to back it up. I cannot support this plan or any plans that are forced upon us that use political power, legislator, for personal gain or whatever that might be. I'm all for any plan that supports biological science and data, and I'm all for that. So thank you for your time.
Braden Richmond representing myself. I sat on the bear committee, this last bear committee. One of the big discussions we had on that and really went around and around was on this baiting and the baiting barrels or containers. At the time, there were some obstacles that were challenging to overcome. Darren at the time said he'd continue working on it, see what could happen. Sometimes when you hear that, you think, well, that's a good way to say it's dismissed. So I just wanted to stand and thank the division for following up, thank Darren for following up. This is the right decision. It makes it so much easier to keep a clean bait. It makes it easier to clean up your bait afterwards. There's a lot of advantages of this, and we're just excited to see this happen. Thank you.
Thanks, Brady. That's all the comment cards I have for this agenda item. I concur with that. All right, we'll open it up to RAC discussion. Mike?
Always picking on me. I do. I actually have a question for Darren, following up JJ's comment on that. Through this, with the increase, and I'm sorry that I'm not as versed with it, with these liberal, are these a recommendation to change them to a liberal harvest this year?
Yeah, these are recommendations for the next 3-year cycle.
Okay.
So, again, you know, these are based on direction that we've given to our biologists, but are also, you know, what harvest strategy they choose is up to the biologist. And one of the things in the Bear Committee that we really want to emphasize is giving power back to our local biologists. They're the ones that know the area the best. But obviously there's a social component here. So we try to take feedback from all sources, and then I'd like to give some direction to our biologists so they kind of understand the concerns or pressures that we're seeing on our end as well. So that's kind of how that went out. And one of the things that we did tell them is look at your conflict. If you've got sheep allotments or you've got a unit that has a lot of conflict, you should probably be managing that for a little bit more liberal take and reducing your bear densities and trying to address those. JJ's right, we haven't seen on the boulder specifically a lot of depredation take, but there are some concerns down there, and just in general, you need to be careful probably about having a lot of bears on top of sheep allotments. And frankly, bears don't take a lot of cattle. At least we don't get it reported to us. They may take a calf here and there, but they can devastate a sheep producer. You know, the high end, we've had over 200 sheep killed in a night by a bear that chased them into a draw and suffocated them by piling up on top of each other. So if you're the guy raising those sheep, that's a big deal. So we want to be sensitive to that as well. But this is a recommendation.
Yeah.
Obviously,
So is with the take of bears, was there an increase in the bear population?
No, in fact,
Specific to that unit?
our population suggests it's probably declining somewhat. So, but we probably in 2018 had more bears in the state than probably in the last 50 years. So we were kind of at a high. We were starting to see some downward trend in bear numbers. These recommendations in large part probably mean that would continue to see statewide fewer bears, and then of course it depends on the unit and management strategy for a specific unit, how that might theoretically moderate should level you out. Liberal should continue to push that population downward density. The light harvest would be growing black bears on a unit.
So going to that liberal status would indicate we're well above the objective on the unit?
We don't have a population objective. So again, it's the biologist says, what kind of management needs do I have? Trying to take into account all the stakeholders and then making a recommendation for what we want this population to be doing over the next 3 years. So again, it's not like deer where you're trying to hit a target. It's a little bit more, you have management parameters, but it's a little bit more how the biologist is taking all the information together and decide how he or she needs to manage.
Okay. Darren, is it the same biologist? The deer and elk biologist, or you're saying?
I don't think so. Beaver who's Beaver?
It's the same biologist that does.
Oh, is it?
That does big game recommendations, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
These units we're talking about.
Yeah, sorry, I thought you meant over units.
No.
The Beaver
It is.
folder are two different. Mike Wardle on the Beaver and Morgan Hinton on the boulder.
I'm just confirming it's the same biologist
It does
been
both.
told to grow elk and deer.
Right, and that's another thing that I don't think I specifically mentioned, but if bears are gonna impact deer, it's gonna be in your fawn production. And we do have good data from the Book Cliffs and the LaSalle's, where if you have a fairly high density of bears, both those units have very high bear densities, they can take as many fawns as lions do. That's based on our neonate studies where we call our newborns and look at that specific mortality. I think it's less of a concern on a unit that has a lower bear density, and bears just don't really just have about a 2-week window that they can exploit those fawns dropping, and then they're pretty much done. So if you're not seeing an issue in the fall when you do your classifications like they're doing right now and your fawn recruitment looks good, bears probably aren't the predator that if a predator is causing a problem, it's probably not bears, it's probably coyotes or something.
Okay, let me ask the question. Help me understand this. If the guy comes out into his field and he's missing some sheep, and it's obviously a bear killed him, what does he do then? I mean, houndsmen are the best at targeting that specific animal, but does he have to call food? What does he do?
You get 96 hours from any kind of, if bears are chasing, hanging around, causing problems with the livestock, you have 96 hours to handle it yourself. You can kill the bear, you just need to let us know. You don't have to call and ask for permission. That's in state code. That's true for lions too. What we recommend they do is call the Department of Agriculture, get one of their trappers on site to confirm the loss. And the reason we do that is a couple of reasons. One is they can get compensation if we can verify the loss, compensate for anything that we verify is lost to a bear. The other thing is that it helps our biologists be aware that there might be an issue. And so, one of these, the boulders one is a good example where we haven't had any reports. But when you sit down with the producers, they say, well, yeah, we've had some bears in here, but there's no evidence that that's the case. And so you have to kind of work that through. So we really want producers to let us know if they're getting losses. So we are aware of that. So, but yeah.
And in that 96-hour window, I mean, can you call a houndsman?
Yes.
Go run it?
Yeah.
Like
They
any
can
kind
do
of
it
year.
themselves. They can get someone to come around and help them. It has to be, they can't hire somebody specifically for that purpose. It has to be a family member, if I remember right in the rule, or next kin, or UDAP trapper can do it. So they can get those guys on it. And they've got dogs and they can run it.
All right, well, this bear deal's always bothered me because, you have no idea how many's there, you get percentage of how many were killed, male and female, and plug it into your little program and it tells you whether you got there or not. You've got no way to count them. Anyway, that's a problem in my mind, but also as a rancher on the Boulder Mountain, by the time we lose calves and cows to bear kill, but by the time we find it and then try to find the government trapper and get him to come in where he's somewhere else and 96 hours is gone. It's a headache. It's hard to get verification of it. The calf could have just died of pneumonia and then the bear ate it. And then you'll get, and yeah, I heard the sheep. There's 3 herds of sheep on the west end of the Boulder Mountain. And yeah, if the bear gets in, they can kill enough to where, the herder, where he's right there all the time, can see it. And I've seen these government trappers, they follow these sheep herds around. I mean, it seems like their job. And if you get a bear kill on a cow, it's, it's hard to get verification that that's what it is. And I haven't got anybody in my family that's got a herd of hound dogs. And I can't go ask these guys to come and help me, even if it's 96 hours, according to what you just said. So, number one, getting verification that it's a bear kill is almost impossible, and that may be why nothing gets reported, because we, you know, we've tried it, we've hit it again the wall so long that it's just not happening for us, as far as especially the cattle. And if a bear gets into the sheep herd, that's a different story, because there's somebody right there all the time, or should be. A lot of times the herders there, but the sheep are over here and over there. But there's a lot more to it than just, you know, there was none reported on the Boulder Mountain. Well, there's a reason why it hasn't worked out for us to report it. But by the time the government trapper gets there, and if it's rained or something, the ground's froze, you can't see the tracks. When the bear eats a calf, I mean, they'll kill it. You don't know what it died from. You don't see any major claw marks or something like that. You just got a dead calf, and then it bloats, starts decaying, maggots get rolling in it, and that's when the bear comes. And after he gets done with it, it's just a little bit of hide and a couple of hooves on the head. That's about it. So yeah, the reporting is pretty hard to do, or to get verification. It's pretty much impossible a lot of times, unless you're just really lucky.
Bart, go to you.
Yeah, I wanted to follow up. So for bears, are there any management objectives for a healthy population, or is not something we look at? Is it just we're looking at stakeholder acceptability for bears?
So there isn't a population objective, or it's all based on the harvest strategy that the biologist chooses. And that's largely going to be based on, you know, what density do they want to see bears on a particular, you know, what direction do they want to see that population?
And so that's not state driven, it's just individual biologist driven?
Yeah, biologists can decide that, and then whatever strategy they choose, the plan sets up 2 parameters that they need to manage within. And so every 3 years they'll look at that strategy, and they can change it if they want to, or feel like.
I mean, I guess, what's to prevent extirpation if you're really just trying to prevent bears from predating on?
Yeah, so they do have parameters they have to manage to, even under liberal. So, but the idea is that should be over 3 years, reducing a bear population. And bears are more vulnerable than lions to a reduction, to that kind of pressure. You know, they don't always have cubs every year. If you know, if you got a drought situation, you know, sometimes they won't produce cubs. And so it's definitely something we look at. We have a study with Utah State University ongoing to try to see if we can get better population number estimates based on different techniques, but that's not something that we have at the moment. Our population trend is based on age of harvest. And so, you know, we're back calculating that. We're usually a couple years out. It's usually a couple years old by the time we can make an estimate, because we don't see cubs and usually don't see a lot of yearlings in the harvest. So that's kind of where we are.
So Bart, specifically, there's 2 variables that they look at: the percentage of adult males and the percentage of adult females in the harvest. And those give us a good indication of whether that population is stable, decreasing, or increasing. But those are the 2 variables that the biologists look at.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the windows will change depending on the harvest strategy. So under a liberal harvest strategy, the tolerance for the females in the harvest is higher than it would be under light or moderate. And that's the driver of your population, is what percent of females are being taken every year.
Okay.
Other discussion?
I guess I have a little bit of mixed feelings. I mean, I try and trust the biologists, and respect their opinions and so many units to live with. Feels like we're in a hurry to increase deer herds and that we're gonna do a lot of things that maybe we regret to move that deer herd needle. So I guess I'm just a little bit concerned with that. And then I think the concern that's kind of a personal concern. I should just stick with the Forest Service concern. The Forest Service concern, really, I think that a lot of the steps you've taken with the dating have really kind of answered some of the Forest Service. I think one of the worries that we've had is that some guys, when they start getting a 55-gallon barrel, will decide that an ATV is what they need to go traipsing through the woods, off-road. And we don't want to see that. They're gonna have to carry it on their back. Empty, I hope. I mean, I don't. 55 gallons of donuts is probably. That's been our concern, but I think we're headed there.
I mean, my comments, just a little bit. I mean, the reality is Utah's very different than all the neighboring states as far as it comes to habitat and bear management. You look at a state like Nevada, very few bears, very few hunts available. You go north to Idaho, it's over the counter, shoot them. Utah falls in the middle, and I don't think there's any, it's not a secret that we're trading some deer and elk on the landscape to have a robust black bear population, and that's okay. That's cool. I like black bears. We want to see a diversity. So I really don't like the thought that legislation or a legislator is going to put pressure on us to change strategy. Like, if we get our legs cut out from under us, okay, we can all abide by the law and change like we did on cougars, but if it's not that way for black bears, I think we should manage it as tight and as smart as we possibly can. So if the biologist can really say, this is how I want it in this area, I think we have to give the biologist that ability to decide what to do based on the local constituents and the ranchers, the producers, the hunters, everybody. I just don't know that I'd be in favor of just going liberal. I guess what I'm saying is going liberal on that is probably not going to show an increase in deer or elk that you could ever measure in the short term, based off a few bears. Where I struggle with a lot of these numbers is we go off of percentages, but sometimes the numbers, the sample size is so small on these units, like a beaver unit. It's very, very few bears are being taken. So you can jump from 17% to 50% just by catching the wrong dang bear, honestly. So I struggle with just all that percentage. I think we have to use some smartness of the locals to say, this is what I want to do here, and this is what makes sense. It's also hard when you get a plan like this, like, well, this recommendation, change it, and it's kind of like the mule deer. Well, there's 2,000 things to change. Which one are you going to poke at, right? What are you going to change? Just understanding the black bear hunt structure is over my head, and I study hunt regulations for a living. Very complicated to figure out what you can do. Like I would want a guidebook with me and someone to interpret it when I go bear hunting, to make sure I didn't break a rule, because it is very complicated in this state. And hats off to those that hunt them all the time and have figured it out. But let's keep the black bears and let's try to manage them safely. But it is a trade-off.
I would agree to a lot of what you said with the mix of, we're already trending downwards with those numbers. Why make such a drastic change? I'm all for one for opportunity, but play it out for a couple more years and see where we're at. Not just, we've made a lot of changes in this year and the last few years. We've made a lot of changes with that. Like I said, I'm all for opportunity. The more hunters filled we can have, the better off, you know, everybody's happy. That manages the social aspect of things. People want to hunt. On the flip side of that is, do we go push that much forward on these bears and where they're already trending down? Let's see what 3 more years can do. And my recommendation, go 3 more years, see what happens. They have the ability to change it or add, you know, where they need to be. And right now, we're not even fulfilling that objective now with the numbers. So that's the way I feel. That's my perspective on it.
Well, that was my point. I'm not so sure that we know whether they're trending down or not. We're relying on these houndsmen and the baiters. He's going to shoot the biggest one he finds, and they're going to harvest the biggest one they can find, especially a boar. But if a female's big, they'll harvest her. And then what he's going off on the harvest as far as age, male and female, is being skewed by the hunter. So we don't know if they're going up or down. And I like the fact that the DWR guys like the Boulder Mountains, they're going liberal because of those sheep herds. There's 3 of them. There's probably 6,000 head of sheep there. 3 different owners of herds. If they do have to have a bear get in a herd of those sheep, it can be, you know, catastrophic to that producer. And you know, they say, well, we give them compensation. Well, that's compensation. It's just it's just money, but it doesn't take into account genetics and you know, everything that they lose when that bear kills that ewe or that lamb. And so I like the fact that these guys on the landscape, especially like when they see the possibility of a severe problem to a rancher or to a sheep producer or to the deer herd, you know, like they were saying, when they get doing the classification and their fawns are down, I like the fact that they can recommend the more liberal. And I like especially, you know, the liberal recommendation for the Boulder Mountain, because if and when that bear gets into that sheep herd, and we've seen it more often with cougars, it can really cause some catastrophic cost to that rancher. So it's just kind of between a rock and a hard spot, but I want you to realize that in my mind, I don't think you know what the black bear population's doing. I guess if you're going on percentages, anyway, there's a lot of gray areas and things that we don't know. And we'd love to have the science and the studies, but we don't, and we never will probably with this bear. And probably the cougar deal too. And I'm with you guys. I don't like managing from the legislature these numbers. I think it should go through the RAC and came forward. Anyway, that's my thoughts on it.
I was just gonna say, you know, it's kind of been through the committee on the black bears and the biologists, and I think good recommendations. Speaking from having been on the committee for you there and having those, you put all that time and effort, you get all this information that everybody don't have the same amount of information you get when you're on those committees to make your recommendations. That I think we should support the recommendations and trust that they know more than we do.
Darren, can I ask a quick question? Do we weigh the percentages as far as male versus female, take it differently based on if it was a spot and stock hound versus bait or dogs?
Yeah, you gotta take that into consideration, because you're right. Bait, a person hunting over bait and a person hunting with hounds can be more selective, because they get a chance to look at that bear before they pull the trigger or shoot the arrow or whatever. Spot and stock, if you look at the percentages, spot and stock has much higher female to male. Is probably approaching what is probably occurring on the landscape. They're taking a bear that they see, and that's probably the only chance a lot of them are going to have. So as long as it doesn't have cubs with them, they'll take it. So we do see higher percentages of females in spot and stock. That all goes in the mix for the unit. Spot and stock hunting is a lot less successful, so it's not like waiting. It's not adding a lot of weight to that, but biologists, what we try to do is look at all of these parameters, and that'd be a good thing to look at if you're kind of curious about what your female to male ratio is. We do have a statewide estimate of that based on what hounds say they see in the field. So when they're treeing bears, they can tell that we have a separate survey where we ask them how many females did you tree and how many males, and that usually winds up being about 1.15 females per male, so it's pretty close to even. And again, we're looking at better ways to we're looking at several methods. We're looking at scat detection, dogs, camera traps, hair snare, trying to find a way that we might be able to implement that in our management, gets better estimates of actually how many bears, and even maybe how many individual bears you may have on a unit. What happens now is if you have a unit that doesn't have a lot of harvest, you're right. And in fact, in our recommendations, if it's below a certain threshold, we say, biologist, up to you. You don't have enough harvest to make. You should be looking at your percentages. There just aren't enough. Usually if it's less than 10 bears taken over 3 years, we tell them do what you think is best. And there probably aren't a lot of units where we have enough harvest. We could do an estimate for population just based on ages, and so we just do it statewide. So it kind of depends on your unit, and statewide roll-up indicates a decline, but there may be units where that's not occurring, just depending on the management strategy.
Any other comments? Are you ready to entertain a motion? Someone would like to make one?
I'll make one.
Berlin.
I move we accept the plan as presented.
I'll second.
Got a motion by Berlin to accept the Blackbird Management Plan revision as presented, and a second by Russ. Any discussion needed on the motion? All right, ready to vote. Those in favor of Berlin's motion here, raise your hand. Chuck, Berlin, and Russ. Online, I have Brooklyn in favor. Okay, all those opposed. Mike, Rachel, Riley, Chad. Is that everybody?
Mark's got his hand up.
Mark has his hand up, okay.
See his finger sticking out.
All right, so. That's 8, is that correct? 1, 2, 4.
So we had, there was 3 in favor, right?
There's 9 of us, so it should be 4 to 5.
Yeah, it's 4 to 5.
Fails.
So
it fails 4 to 5. Motion fails. Sorry, my mouth is a little off for the internet. And then- Okay, motion fails 4 to 5. Sorry, Brian. Another motion.
It's very tough to specify the motion because there's such a broad spectrum that we have to agree on. And without really digging into a lot of this, I'd make the motion to not accept the division's proposal. And basically, I don't wanna mix that with what's going on in the north and what's going on in the south. It's a very tough, as Darren talked to us about it, it's very specific to units of what's doing here, what's going there. And looking at it, you know, for the most part, the units, all of the entire state is in that liberal to moderate category. You always put me on the spot, bud. No, that's really not. That was my comment. I'm trying to.
Now, we can break this out if you want some specific. You didn't like.
I don't know what the rules are.
Well, we accepted it not, or he wanted to accept it presented and that failed. So you want to reject the whole proposal? Is that a possibility?
Good. That doesn't give the wildlife board much to work with. If
Tell 'em
you've
what
got
to do.
specific things.
Yeah. We didn't like it all. Try again. Or if there's some specific.
Well, I think the problem is, like he said, it's state, his numbers are statewide. They haven't got enough data to go unit by unit, even southern versus the rest, I guess, huh?
There is on some units, but not all units. Like, I mean, the units with high bear population for LaSalle, the Boulder, the Oak Cliffs, the Manti, the San Juan, but a lot of them don't, so.
Now, one option is to make a motion specifically to bear units in our region. And if we wanted to voice something there, we can make a motion that way. Do something different, but
You did have a public comment about those two specific units too, and that might be something we could dive into.
I'm just looking through the list outside of our region there. I'm just looking which ones increased in our region. Am I missing some other ones besides Boulder and Beaver?
Let me pull it. Oh, in your region?
And Fish Lake, like,
Let me pull up the slide where we listed it. Just to make sure.
everything else looks up more.
So yeah, the Boulder, Fish Lake. Beaver didn't change. Beaver stays the same.
Beaver went up too.
Yeah.
But the strategy.
But the
stayed.
strategy is the same. So the recommendation should fall within the parameters that were set. And sometimes you've got one out and another out in a different direction, and that falls to the biologist. I recommend they look for females first. And if there's some discrepancy, that's how they maybe have a tiebreaker.
No, Darren, even on the Boulder, for example, it went from moderate to liberal on the strategy. The permit recommendations did not change. Is that accurate?
I think they might have moved some permits around it.
Just moved it around. for
Different
harvest.
times.
Okay, but permits are the same.
Let me double check, but yeah. So.
Actually, it did go up. 30%.
You're right, the permits did not change. I think I don't have last year's numbers handy, but I think what we did is we moved some around and put quite a few into that spot stock season where you're likely to take more females, and that's likely to have a little bit more impact on overall densities.
You're less likely to take a bear.
You're less likely to take a bear, but they are in the field during the big game seasons on that spot stock. So if they see one, it's a lot more people in the field, a lot more eyes in the field. So again, I mean, we can, if the RAC wants to get into the details on how those permits are split out, we certainly can do that. Northern region had some discussions on cash along those lines.
I gotta think this through.
So I have the changes, we have the baiting barrel
Yeah,
section, right?
we can separate that out. I mean, if we wanted to make that a motion, we don't have to put the whole thing in once. We can split them up. We should split it up. So, let's just get that out of the way. I make a motion to, on the barrel, as presented, recommendation from the division.
So to accept the changes to baiting regulations
Yes.
as presented.
Can we get a motion by Mike? Do we have a second?
The question, does that create any conflict for you there? Or?
No, the only other, if you want to combine two, we had a couple of rule changes. One is the barrels. The other is allowing a person with a multi-season permit to hunt during a harvest objective season. Those are really the only two rule changes other than just some cleanup language. So put that in a motion. If those aren't too controversial things,
We can add that to the motion.
So to accept changes to baiting regulations and other rule changes.
Yeah.
As presented.
Do we have a second? Second by Chuck.
Okay.
All those in favor of the motion, rule changes? Raise your hand. Unanimous here, and can't see Bart, but Riley, Chad, Brooklyn.
And Chuck was,
And Bart.
Chuck was the second on that.
Yeah, Mike made the motion, second by Chuck, and it's unanimous. Okay, thank you, Mike.
So now you've got to deal with the permit
Yeah,
recommendation.
this Viper management plan revision would be as a whole, including the recommendations.
Any other motions?
The hesitation, we don't want to make recommendations for the north. Is there a way to make a motion, say we defer on that part, but want to talk about our part?
You could make a recommendation just to the specific units. I mean, like the houndsman brought two, you could do it that way. You could do, certainly you could be specific to accept some and not others.
3 units in the south. 3 units specific to the south. You know, we get in this deal with our separate units to make a recommendation for the people up north, or they make our recommendations, and I get that's what we're here for, but it's tough because it's so diverse. We have such a different landscape, those types of things. So,
So let me, Teresa just sent me a text on the boulder recommendation. The moderate strategy would have reduced permits on the boulder. By going to the liberal strategy, they were able to stay with the same number. That's, they feel that they're in a good spot. Had to go to liberal to stay at the number they're at. That was from our wildlife manager. So.
okay.
And I would think, I mean, we make any motion we want, but it's what sentiment you want to pass to the wildlife board from this meeting. Motion is a chance to do that. Sometimes wildlife board reads all the comments and all the minutes. Sometimes they take the motions. They don't have time to read them all.
I'm sure you do. Yes, I'm sure you do, Paula.
So would that be the same reason that liberal on the Beaver?
So Beaver didn't change. Beaver stayed moderate. The recommendation was to increase 2 permits, but that was allowed under the moderate strategy.
So it stayed the same.
So it stayed the same. The other one that changed was the fish lake went from a light to a moderate.
Beaver's liberal.
Beaver's liberal.
Or Beaver's liberal, so it stayed where so there wasn't a strategy change. Sorry, thanks for the correction.
And Kevin, she said that it allowed to keep the permits where they're at.
Yes.
Because the population is declining.
So that maybe would have changed a little bit, knowing that, I guess I didn't.
So there isn't a recommendation to increase permits on the boulder. There is a recommendation to change the strategy from moderate liberal, but keep the permits the same as they have been for the last 3 years.
So do we know the swing? How many more permits can we add in liberal than we can where it's at? Sorry for the.
No, that's fine.
There could have been a significant increase.
I'll give you the
in
range.
liberal.
Yeah, it could be up to 50%, which would mean, they could have adjusted those permits up to 40.
Added 40.
Could have added 40 or somewhere in between. So they're keeping it the same.
Can that still happen?
Can it still happen? This is for the next 3 years. So whatever the board decides this time around, that's what will remain in place for the next 3 years. And then they'll
But
take
can the
them.
permits change that 50%? Can that swing at any given time?
No, not unless, what we've asked the board to do is let us do 3-year chunks and keep things the same so that we can kind of gauge what's going on. And so unless there was an emergency, we wouldn't ask to change that.
So let me clarify that. I'm guessing I'm a little confused. So are we talking about the strategy for the permits or both?
Both.
So then we're not.
What we're recommending today would be in place for 3 years. And the
Okay,
range I
it's
gave
just the
you,
strategy and we can change the
right,
permits.
the biologist,
next year.
based on the strategy and where they fall on the parameters, they can adjust permit, in the case of the boulder, from 0, which is what they did, up to 40 additional permits. They felt like they would accomplish their management goals, assuming that we're seeing a decline and addressing the livestock producers' concerns. Again, this is kind of a statewide concern that we let everybody know about. That's something that's definitely top of mind for some of our leaders. So that's kind of where we are on that specific. If I don't recall how it would change, I can do something real quick and I can give you some idea what might change. Let me just quickly, I'll switch it to moderate. This is helpful if you don't want to mess around with this. So if we switch it to moderate, they're low. They would put it low on the adult male. It's 14% over the last 3 years. It should be between 25 and 35. So theoretically, you want to reduce tags and get those adult male numbers up. And it's high on female range. It's 48%. It should be between 30 and 40 under moderate. So they could adjust permits. Sorry, I need to do one more thing. Between 20 and 40%. And in numbers, that means between 16 and 32 adjustment, since they're both out in a negative way for maintaining moderate strategy. They'd be reducing permits between 16 and 32. And if the RAC doesn't want to get into that minutia, you could certainly direct. If you want to change the strategy and have a biologist make a new recommendation based on these parameters, that's probably a way we could look at. Of course, the board has the final say.
So has the boulder been moderate?
It was, yeah, it was. So it's changing to liberal. And again, that change allowed them to maintain their, which is something we wanted to see on. We wanted them to think about in terms of sheep allotments.
So Darren, they maintain the numbers that they had last year, but this gives them the ability to increase down the road, the next 3 years, right?
After this next 3-year cycle. Yeah,
After
so
the 3-year cycle.
Without adjusting the strategy, there would have had to have been a reduction. So the change in strategy was meant to maintain where we're at, essentially.
I mean, looking at these numbers, I like the numbers. The numbers speak to what's happening, right? If we trust the number of targets. Now, it is a super small sample size. Last year, there's only 21% of permits were filled. So it's like a dozen bears.
they killed, we look at 3-year chunk, they killed 50 bears.
Based on a 50
over 3 years. 50
harvest
bears.
of
So that's a pretty good sample size.
Is that a good sample?
But again,
for bears.
For bears. And keep bearing in mind that people are being selective. You're gonna wanna try to take a bigger bear if you can, and probably a male bear if you can. So those numbers might actually be a little higher than what they are in the general population.
So just jumping over to say out of those 50 bears, 48% of them are half or females. Right, so that's the concerning line, that is this bear trending down out of males to shoot. So the only way you keep the same amount of permits is changing delivery. Otherwise you would have permits.
I want to remake my motion.
You can make another
Make
motion.
a new motion.
That motion's gone.
Sorry. Bear management plan revision, separate this for them.
You want to accept the bear management plan as presented?
Well, that's what we're doing, the revision of it, aren't we? I mean, we've already passed it.
The second half.
So the baiting, was that rule?
That was a rule change.
Yes. So Utah bear, black bear management plan revision. I'd like to make a motion that we accept that.
As presented.
Yeah.
That would be about the same motion you made before, right? With that second half already.
Minus the rule change.
Minus the rule change.
So to accept the remaining.
I'm seconded again.
Nothing's really changed, and they got the opportunity to go higher, but we're relying on the biologist on these allotments, or allotments to make a decision, and we're trusting them, and probably should.
So what Merlin's saying is, it's really essentially the same motion, but we have more information now to vote on than we had in the first one, so it's still a valid motion.
Okay, I got a motion by Berlin, a second by Russ. Ready to vote? Motion. All right. Rachel?
No.
Rachel's a no. And Chuck?
Yes.
And Mike? No. And Russ?
Yes.
Berlin?
Yes.
And Bart?
No.
And Brooklyn?
Yes.
And Riley?
Yes.
And Chad?
No.
Okay, motion passes. This time 5-4. Check my math on that. Does that sound right? Okay. All right. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
You answered a lot of great questions for us. We appreciate that.
Yeah.
Go to agenda item number 8 before we take a break. Cougar recommendations and rule.
So, we're only really asking for two things on this, just real quick. One is to allow the sale of green pelts. Person currently can sell a tanned hide, cougar hide. And we had a request, actually the board asked us to look at this. And we couldn't, there doesn't seem to be any reason why if you could sell it tanned, you shouldn't be able to sell it green. So we're recommending that that be allowed. And then the other is to allow room fire ammunition to take cougars caught traps. A lot of times trappers, they've got some kind of rim fire firearm, they're checking traps for bobcats or whatever. And if they catch a cougar, they want to be able to use that firearm. And I think, use the gun that you're comfortable with and it's gonna cause lethality as quickly and humanely as possible, but if you are confident you can do it, then I don't see any reason to prohibit it. That's it, really.
Questions for Darren? I have a question. You provided a neat graph on your presentation.
Yeah.
On the concern about multiple lines, like are some people just taking multiple lines? And it's a very small number, I thought.
Yeah, 99% of the people who harvested a lion under this new management strategy just took one. And so we may see some increase, folks want to sell, the market for cougar hide is not huge. Sometimes taxidermists will buy them to mount and sell them out. But again, you can sell it at hand, like taxidermists do. This just gives you stuff. Frankly, that way the taxidermists have a little more control and quality control over it. It's more likely to get handled properly. So that's fine. But again, we'll keep an eye on it. We see some increases, but 428 people out of took 1, and then it drops down to 21 took 2, and 5 took 3, 2 took 4, and 3 took 5, and nobody took more than 5. So that's kind of how it looks right now. Let's see if that shifts to anything.
And help me understand, I mean, it seems like it's almost a non-issue because we're taking about the same amount of cougars as we have in years past.
Yeah.
Maybe the take has changed a little bit, or method of take, I should say, but if you stood here today and said we took 5,000 cougars this year, what could be done about it anyway?
We have regulatory control, so we wouldn't be able to change anything in code. And the big things that changed in code is you no longer need a permit, and you can use a hunt. You just have to have a hunting license to take a lion. And in the season became year-round, which it kind of was anyway. So we could look at a bag. We had concerns about overharvest. We could certainly say you can't have more than 2 a year. That's certainly on the table. The reason that we didn't recommend a bag is because we felt like that was in the intent language of the legislature. That's what they had in mind, just to open it up and see if we could get cougar densities down. But if we started having concerns, frankly,
The board would still have authority to set season dates.
right, we could
Season dates.
on
units?
specific units. Yeah, we could do that. Yeah, we could. So there's options on the table, and I think our strategy initially was, let's let this run for 3 or 4 years and just see what happens. And if we have some concerns, then come back and address it. But frankly, be fairly liberal to begin with and just see what happens. So one thing with lions, you've got that source and seek dynamic that you don't necessarily have with other species. Lion hunting isn't easy to be successful, and so you may get drainages that get hit pretty hard. You may see lions disappear from the drainage, but then you have other places in the winter that you just can't go. Dogs wouldn't want to go or whatever, and those tend to be sources then for lions in other areas. So that's kind of going on. Yeah, we'll just sorry. I saw some hands up. Maybe talking too much.
I was just gonna make a comment with the lions, they travel so much,
Yeah.
and the data shows there in southern Utah, a lot of those lions are coming out of Nevada from a long ways over.
Yeah,
Coming in, and so it changes.
That's right. We should think about lion populations as multi-state. We've seen our collared lions. We had one go to the Tetons, turn around and come all the way back to over by City of Rocks over a year, and one went way out into Colorado, and one bounced about halfway across Colorado. So that's happening both ways. So I don't think there's a large risk of extirpation, but it might put the pinch on some very localized hunting. And I'm sure Houndsman can testify. There's probably some places where it's a lot harder to find a lion than it used to be.
We'll see. Can we take age data on all harvested lions?
Yes. So you're still required to turn those in, pull a tooth, and age them, and that's how we get an estimate of the population. And this USU study is also looking at all carnivores, so it's looking at lions, bobcats, bears, and they're even, if you've got a coyote component that go on their own.
It would not be accurate to call a cougar in Utah a predator under predator management. Is that accurate?
It is, that would be accurate. It is a predator. If you're talking about, there probably is something specific in code where they define that.
I don't think so.
And I don't,
They're defined as, we have a predator management policy. They're
Right,
defined
and
there,
so that's
they
addressed
fall
there.
under that predator management policy.
it's addressed in our policy. So, and we don't have management authority over coyotes. We do manage the programs to try to alleviate predation on deer. For the bounty program, we work with UDAF to do flights and targeted removals. But again, we don't regulate coyote take. It's open season all year round. Any method, you don't need a license.
So I'll jump forward a little bit.
Sure.
Does the DWR have management regulatory authority to create a predator cougar bounty program?
We could, yeah, we have authority. I think, that'd be something the legislature would have to address in terms of funding. But,
Yeah, not talking funding,
but
just
we,
the
yeah,
management.
I don't think there's anything in code that would preclude.
It would take some, you have to have a fee structure and a bunch of things set up that the legislature would have to be cooperative with, but there's anything that would preclude us from starting a process that could end there. It was not something that could happen quickly.
Sure. I'm just trying to understand the designation between what's a big game, what's a
Yeah.
predator, what's a non-game, and where cougars sit.
Our general categories is it protected wildlife or not, and there's fall under the protected definition. There is something in code where they define predators, and I can't remember, there's a list, but it's coyotes and foxes. Does that ring a bell? Yeah. So, and that's a little different, and again, those are generally unmanaged or have no limits. And so, cougars still would fall under protected wildlife with pretty liberal regulations on how, when, how many.
Yeah, so some states define what a predator is and would, say that there is no regulations on predators. We don't, it's in Utah, it's protected wildlife and non-protected wildlife, and bears and cougars both fall under protected wildlife.
I think that's
Meaning that we have management authority.
That's an important distinction, I think, for me to understand, and people, when they heard of the cougar thing come up, that it's free game, right? They're just nothing, they're like a coyote, but that's not true.
Yeah.
It is a protected game of very, very liberal open season.
And that was done on purpose. I mean, that would have been an option, and the legislature decided not to go quite that far with it.
Thank you. Any other questions from the RAC? Rachel?
Yep, sorry.
Okay. Would the change in the firearm ruling affect the number of people that would pursue trapping, do you think?
Trapping's a pretty specialized group of folks. We're always anxious to see more people enter in, but you really have to be good. You've got to have a certain knowledge base and really know what you're doing. And that takes a little bit of time. So yeah, if we can get more people to participate, I think that'd be good. Right now, it doesn't look like people are specifically trapping for mountain lions. Usually, most of our indications are that with the new regulations, people have been catching mountain lions in bobcat sets, for a while. And in the past, they would have to release those, and now they don't have to, so they take them. So most of the trapping take looks like it was incidental take of lions and other sets, either coyote or bobcat, and then they just harvest the lions, so let it go. And that can change, we'll see.
Questions from the public. JJ, do you have a question?
Yeah. Do you know, Darren, by chance, so I know we are harvesting about the same amount of lions, got two questions. One, do you know what that's done to the age class of cats? Do you have that data with you?
I can look at that off the top of my head. JJ, I think it looks like we're seeing younger animals in the harvest, which would jive with the downward trend in lion numbers.
I believe it's like 16 months.
Yeah.
Average.
So
usually with their mother till 18 months.
Right. Typically, yeah, if you're hunting lions, you want to take an older age male first, big guys. Once that population dwindles, you start to see older age females show up in the harvest. And then once those are taken, you start to see younger age classes.
Yeah,
so, because those are the ones that are available to take. So that is definitely an indication of kind of where the population is. And again, that might where people hunt lions can be fairly localized even within a unit. So it may not translate statewide, but it certainly translates to where people are taking lions.
Yeah, for sure. I guess my second question, going back to data and science and biology, we're really fortunate in Utah, both bear and lion, that every animal that's harvested, a tooth gets pulled, right? We put down a GPS location, bear and lion, where the animal's killed, so we know how close they were to the sheep herd and what side of the mountain these bears are living on, and deer and cats, so we know how that's affecting everything, right? We have the age class, and this, I really don't know, to be honest, but to sell a green pelt, where does that come from? Does that benefit? I really don't, I have no idea. I know they're CITES, And maybe that's why, so that when somebody, because they're CITES, if you know what a CITES is, right? Meaning the federally
Lions
managed.
don't fall under CITES,
They
which
don't
is
anymore.
the federal reg.
Because they still have to get federal ban.
Right, it's about international trade and
So that is
bobcats fall under that agreement. That's why you have to get your bobcat pelts sealed. Mountain lions are a fairly ubiquitous species across North and South America. There's a lot of the same species, and so they don't fall under CITES. You know, honestly, this regulation's been in place for a long time. I think we were in a different place with lion management 20 years ago. And I think they were thinking differently. And so when we looked at it, I couldn't find any documentation or any reason that I could see why, if you can sell it tanned, you wouldn't be able to sell it green. And so that's why.
I haven't done any studying on a green pelt selling benefits, and I guess I'm just curious where that's come from.
I think
Hopefully
maybe
benefits somebody versus
some of
them
the
going to waste.
reason, you know, that might encourage people to, you know, if you can sell it, you don't go through that hassle of tanning it first, that maybe we'll get a little bit more harvest. I think some folks would like to see that. So there's probably a little bit of that. And frankly, I don't know.
That's my fear, is that point. I hope it's the trapper saying we want this to help us and not a political push of, hey, if we get this through, it's going to kill the cats.
I think, I mean, lions are controversial, predators are controversial. You got a lot of different things, but this was a request, you know, the trappers brought it up and then the board wanted us to look into it. And then we'll keep an eye on it and see, but I just, based on what people are doing now, I don't know what people will take. Well, you get about $140 for a lion pelt, and you have to charge more if it's tanned because you have to incur that expense. But, you know, I don't think it changes the math a ton. So we'll see, and we'll definitely report back.
Kevin, can you summarize public comment for us?
Yes, there was one, strongly agree.
100%.
100%.
We'll go to public comment. Got a couple comment cards here. First of all, Kelly Layer.
BB. Okay.
Kelly and Lane will be next.
Okay, I'm Kelly Laren. I'm here representing the Utah Trappers Association, as well as myself, but we highly support the recommendations made by the division on being able to sell a green cougar hide. To most of us, there's no sense in wasting the resource. If you're going to kill it, you just will utilize it. You know, not everybody needs another lion rug on their wall, so why not be able to sell it? You know, you're gonna, utilize the whole thing and sell the skull as well. So I know in the fine print it says not that you can't sell the skull or the claws, but the claws are going to be on the hide if you're going to rug it or full mount it. But why not legalize selling the skulls too? I don't think this will affect the harvest at all, but it'll just utilize the resource a little better. Thank you.
Wayne?
I'm Wayne Abraham, Dan Kelly. He already took what I was gonna say. So I came to this board here, or the RAC, a while back and asked for you guys to check in and see if we could pursue the sale of these green pelts. I already have a big lion on the wall. I catch another one, what am I gonna do with it? Short of spending the money in tanning. But what I would like to ask you guys is we need to attach to that selling the green pelt to be able to sell the lion parts, the skull. You know, believe it or not, there's people out there that'll buy the whole carcass, the skeleton. Don't ask me what they do with it, but there is a market for that stuff. And I'm not out pursuing trying to catch a lion, but if I catch one, I'd like to be able to, like Kelly says, maximize the resource. So if you guys could, I'd ask you to maybe ask for a change in the language of that. Thank you.
JJ, did you have a comment on this one?
That was it, I got it.
That's it for public comments. RAC discussion.
Is there any kind of, for Darren, anything that speaks to the knowledge of selling a whole carcass? Is it gonna have to be skinned, skull plate removed? I mean, that whole, is that all gotta be pulled out of there? Or can we just say, here's the carcass, the division's had it, it's all yours?
I
Good
think
luck.
we could do it. One thing I need to check is the code. I don't know if the code precludes the sale of skulls and claws. If it does, we'd have to get that changed legislatively. But, you know, I thought about this a little bit. It came up last week after one of the meetings. I don't know that there's any reason, and it's a good point. A lot of times those claws are gonna remain part of the hide. And so at very least, and again, I don't know if law enforcement has any red flags going off about letting people sell a skull, let me know, but I can't think of any biological reason that someone could do that. Other than, you know, maybe sets a precedent for other things, but I don't think that's what's strong argument. So yeah, if the RAC would like to recommend that, we can certainly look into it a little bit more, but I don't foresee.
It seems like it may be a little unclear whether,
Yeah,
I mean, is
the current recommendation would preclude the sale of skull and claw specifically. And so, you know, we need to change that rule. I'll check right now, but I don't think that's the code.
Maybe we understand the intent of why those protections are in there, right? Creating
Yeah.
a commodity out of.
This goes back to, right, it goes back to, we were in a different place philosophically, you know, 20 years ago when most of these regulations were written than we are today.
There's skull collectors, there's domestic beetle companies, there's museums that are like, hey, I'll buy skulls or full projects or whatever.
Yeah.
There may be a little market for it, but I don't think it's a commodity.
There's more money in the skull than there is in the hide.
I'll check code while
Any other discussion? Are we ready for a motion?
depending on what the code says, I guess it kind of changes the motion, where we need to add or take out, or. Or we just make the motion.
Possible.
And that'll get clarified at the board meeting if it's not, if it's in
Yeah,
code.
let us know what you want to do and we'll figure it out.
Okay, make a motion, sell it all and then see what happens.
There you go. And make a motion to pass as presented with the sale of the whole carcass of the mountain lion.
Or parts thereof.
Or parts thereof.
The motion is to accept as presented and expand the sale of any portion or entire carcass.
Where's mine?
Hold on. So tell me if this hits it, Mike, to accept as presented and allow the sale of all the parts of mountain lions unless precluded by state code. That covers your
whole summary.
Just doing a quick search, it looks like it says the wildlife board, it's precluded unless the wildlife board says you can sell it. So if they decide that you can do it.
Okay, do we have a second? Second by Verlin?
So motion by Mike and seconded by Verlin.
Correct. All those in favor of the motion? We got one no from Rachel here, and online, I have 4 yeses. So motion passes 8-1. Rachel, would you like to speak to your number?
I just feel like mountain lion hunting, or not just hunting, but predator control needs a lot of precision. And I feel like the way it's moving, there's not a lot of precision, and that this just kind of opens up, incentivizes without any regulatory. You know what I'm saying? So I guess it's certain.
Okay, that ends the agenda item number 8. We'll take a quick break.
DWR making
Who we lose?
We've got all the RAC members.
Are they gonna count us down or are we?
I don't know, I've never.
You're live, Southern Region. You're ready to go.
Okay.
They're ready when you are.
Better than we are. I think we're about ready.
Okay.
We're ready to just kick off, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Welcome back. Agenda item number 9. There again, Utah Furbearer recommendations and rule.
All right, so these recommendations are for 25, 26, so next year. And the short explanation is that we're not recommending any changes other than calendar date shifts. There are some areas where we're gonna do some administrative closures to
Adam, the owl lights are blinking. Is that a problem?
I think it's been doing that. It's good. Yeah. And I can go through those. There are a few down here. Let's see, 3 Mile Creek in Garfield County, Little Creek in Iron County, Reservoir Canyon in Washington County. And then there are some areas that we're recommending the open beaver take, so Pine Creek, Hunt Creek. Those are the 2 southern region ones. So again, those are administrative, those are things we do usually with our habitat section, our fisheries folks. If they want to try to, and land management agencies, and they want to try to recover a riparian zone and have some beavers help us do that, then we'll close or open those depending on what
These are all high elevation streams. They're not places where we're worried about problems with irrigation companies and beavers getting established in ditches and those sorts of areas.
We specifically look at what are the conflict potentials, and if there's potential for conflict, we'll put beavers into that situation. We may do some artificial dams, try to get at it without the animals in some of those situations, but we definitely don't want to cause problems that way. Okay. So other than that, yeah, that's pretty much it.
Any questions from the RAC? Questions from the public?
Darren, is any of those closures, would they be suitable for maybe otter habitat and possible look at? You're already gonna close down the beaver trapping, do an otter transplant in some of those areas?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that.
These aren't big enough streams where we'd be supporting otter populations.
Yeah, I know otters, don't fall under my group of species, but I do talk with our mammals, native species folks. And as far as I know, they don't have any imminent plans to move otters around. They're trying to assess, and they did some surveys trying to assess where we have them. I think that was largely successful, but it's tough to know how many, just whether they're there or not, but I don't think they've got.
They're well established on all the tributaries coming into Lake Powell.
Yeah.
I have a soft spot in my heart for them. I was in the Trappers Association when we purchased the first one and transplanted below the Green River, below Flaming Gorge. And I really ever hear anything happening with them other than they're expanding.
Yeah, I think definitely established. It looks like there's a little bit of expansion, but.
So since the time they were transplanted in the Green River, they've also been transplanted to the Provo River and to the Escalante, and then through coming in from the San Juan is the main source of otters through a transplant that happened in Colorado is the main source of otters coming into Lake Powell.
So just to add on these 3 streams that we're proposing, the Forest Service wanted to propose these, they're too small. There's no fish population that would support our population. There's just very small, mostly a lot of non-native fish.
Generally, it's an effort to raise the water table and get some ponds and that kind of thing. So it could improve the fishery, but they're different objectives.
Tim, did we have any public comments on this one?
There was one neutral comment. Neither agreed nor disagreed, so.
All right.
That always baffles me.
Yeah, at least they weighed in.
Okay, public comment. I have one. Kelly?
Yeah, I'm with the Trappers Association and we just support the recommendations made. Thank you.
Any RAC discussion?
Entertain a motion? Motion that we pass this proposed.
Chuck motions to pass the Utah Furbearer recommendations as proposed.
I'll second it.
Second by Mike. All those in favor?
Here in the room. Unanimous here in the room.
And I've got 4 hands online, unanimous. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Darren. Appreciate you coming down.
Yes.
All right, agenda item number 10. Devri Tanner, Coyote Boundary Rule Amendments. Welcome.
There, I don't have any updates, so we can start with any questions you have.
Questions for Dennis? Russ.
So you're proposing to increase the boundary to 75 from your critical, crucial, is that how you?
Yeah, the crucial, yes.
My concern for the Pine Valley and the Southwest Desert, especially, the critical area that you're proposing seems quite small. It's the higher country that what would be notorious, the fawning areas, but those whole areas, that whole area, and I heard conversation in some of the other RACs that is it 70% or something of the coyotes that are being harvested and turned in are coming from non-critical areas, right? Is that
Yeah,
correct?
so crucial for the southern region, there's 28% that are killed in crucial mover habitat for the last like 3 or 4 years.
Yes. And I have trouble with the designation just because so much of the Southwest Desert and even the Pine Valley that's not in the crucial, those deer migrate from the crucial to those areas, and so the St. Coyotes are, my recommendation I think that needs to be the same for both areas. What was the other one? The designation besides critical, that it's substantial.
Yeah, so there's crucial and substantial.
I think those should stay the same and actually increase both of them to 100. I think you need to incentivize the coyotes. It costs them for gas and tires for these guys to go hunting. Honestly, it's tough to get a coyote.
There's a lot of sentiment.
So I think it is incentivized.
Looks to me like you're opening it up for somebody to kill a coyote and take it over to a crucial area and take a picture of it. I mean, somebody, in my mind, might do that for $25.
It's worth the gas to do that.
So is there any way to make that more, so guys can make sure it's killed where they say it's killed? Is there any?
So that's why we initially decided on the $75 increase for crucial areas, and we focused on the crucial areas because that's where fawning habitat is. And based on different research that's been done, especially in the Monroe Mountain area, the most susceptible time for the mule deer is during that fawning time. And so if we target coyotes during that time, it gives a better chance for mule deer survival. And then the other part of that, we chose to up from in rule, we removed the $50 cap. And then on top of that, we're suggesting 75, we're recommending $75 because of the idea that we don't want to increase fraud too much. We want to incentivize it more because we value mule deer. And I think based on research and everything, that targeted approaches are more effective at increasing mule deer production. So that's where the $25 additional comes. And we didn't increase it to like 200 or anything because of the worry that fraud, there will be more incentive for fraud. With our app, there was a large decrease in the fraud because you have to take a picture where you take the coyote and it geotags the location at the time. And with that electronic certification, it's decreased a lot of fraud, and obviously there always will be a few people that are trying to cheat the system or whatever, but we really do want to try and protect mule deer in these areas. And to your point of increasing to 100 and crucial and substantial, you do have, as a RAC, you can decide different funding sources. We just recommend with different discussions, and the idea that increasing the bounty will bring more people to the program potentially. We recommend that if you want to increase it past 75, that we stick to about $100 in crucial areas, just so that we can see what this targeted increased payment in the targeted areas will do, but it won't burn through the money quickly and make people drop out if, say, the funding runs out too soon. So we do want to incentivize and target these areas. We also want to be mindful that it could bring more people. So based on past data, we could go up higher, but you have to also keep in mind that more people might come because they're realizing that the bounty program is still happening, and then also if there's more money, it might draw more people in. So we just want to, we're recommending to increase it slightly and then monitor to see how it goes. You can change it from there. If that answers your questions.
Devri, I got a question. I remember when this started, we used to have to stand in line to turn in these coyotes back in, what was it, 2012, 2013, right? It was very exciting that you could get a $50 check someday in the mail over a coyote. But now, obviously, inflation has increased way more than we're proposing here over the last 11, 12 years. Help me understand where this app came up, because I feel like it came up and I'm so broken, it just fell by the wayside. And now, like, I never submitted one through the app. I was back in the paper days, but is the app still, does it still exist?
So there has been, granted, I started working with this program in April, but from talking to the different regions and the different biologists, there have been a lot of struggles with the app, and that's why for the last year, we've been using a new version. So it's a Survey 123 through ArcGIS, which is like a big, they're their own company kind of thing, so they can take into account phone updates and all those different minutiae that typically get overlooked in an app that's run by smaller companies or by us or whatever.
So a bunch of biologists is what she's trying to say.
People that have different specialties. But so we've been using the Survey 123 app since I believe September of last year, and it's been working a lot better. We're able to update things as needed and troubleshoot a lot better because we're focusing more on the app, the Coyote side of it, rather than the back end mechanics of things. And so it's still a Coyote bounty reporter, but it's just on a different app, and we don't intend on moving, because I know that was another frustration that the app kept switching. But with this current one, we don't have to keep the updates like I mentioned. So for the foreseeable future, I think this app will stick around, and it's a lot easier for people to use from what we've heard from different hunters in the region. So.
Second question, how did we do such a poor job in losing our funding? Is it simply because no one was hunting coyotes or no one was turning them in? Like, it was 500,000, correct, when we started, and since we didn't use our funding from the state, we lost it, and now our cap's 250, is that correct?
Yeah, so from what, and Darren can speak to this more if you'd like, but from the beginning, we did have 500,000 allocated, and then we didn't reach that even $250,000, so they reduced it, and now it's part of the general fund allocation. I don't know if there's more you want to speak to on that.
So, yeah, are we stuck there? That's my question.
No, I think there's, well, I've talked to some legislators who said, you need more money. So it really comes down to, we just weren't spending it. That money used to roll over. And so in the first few years, we actually were spending more than 500,000. And because it rolled over from the first couple of years, we actually had funding to cover that. That's no longer the case. It just comes, we get a block of general fund that comes to us, and then we allocate those monies in the budgets, and that's our budget for this is we've been authorized to spend up to $250,000. So we'd like to spend that money and hopefully, give them a little bit more bounty for some of these coyotes that in these crucial areas will do that. And then, we'll monitor it. If it looks like we need to ask for, be able to spend more money, we can certainly cross that bridge when we get there. But we want to be a little bit careful and remain within our budget and to begin with and see how this shakes out.
Sure. Austin, I think it's safe to say if we could show that we were overspending what was allocated in the coyote bounty, there would be it would be increased through the legislature.
And what is the fiscal year? What is it set off of?
July
reset?
1st through June 30th.
And that's the same for take as well, like it resets, like if we run out of funding in June, it'll restart in July.
So you, from the time you kill the coyote, you have 365 days, so a full year to submit that coyote. And so it is possible if you kill a coyote and they run out of funding, if you still have room left in the 365 days, people will wait until the beginning of the next fiscal year. Which is why in rule it says that if in the past, if you would go over 50, if you used all of your funding, the next year it'd be reduced to $45 per coyote, just to kind of compensate for that influx that'll come right at the beginning of the fiscal year. That's how it's working.
Another question on these crucial zones, right? Your map that you used on is great, but it was way too small for me. So like all the little red outlines as defined, is that something I would see in the app? Or how would I know? Like on Hunt Planner, do I go on there and see the map? And is it just, I can shoot a coyote and really have no idea if it's a $50 coyote or $75 coyote until I submit it in the app and you pay me? Is that?
So that's a great question. We are working on a layer in Hunt Planner. Currently, the mule deer habitat layer is in Hunt Planner. I believe if you look at the habitat and specifically mule deer, it'll tell you crucial, substantial. But we would implement specifically a coyote map that shows you where the bounties are. So you can look at Hunt Planner and decide, just as you would with any other hunt, where you would look for coyotes and what bounty would be associated with that location. Because we want it to be clear, like where we want targeted efforts.
And is it the division's opinion that in these non-habitat, they were called non-habitat area, right? The 2/3 of conservation, it was just straight up non-habitat, non-mule deer, no mule deer live here, it's just a coyote shot out on the animal range. Is that?
Yeah, so based on mapped areas from Biologist, and I'm not sure how much of an effort it would take to update these maps, but just based on this map mule deer area. Yeah. Okay. I just want to speak to that. Just the areas that they don't typically use for their habitat throughout their normal way.
Thank you. Any other questions?
One question about timing. So if I shoot a coyote, I mean, is there a season on that crucial habitat, or you can shoot it there anytime? So I can shoot it there in October when there isn't a fawn problem or a coyote problem and still get the bounty, or?
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like if you really want to make the biggest impact, you gotta hunt May and June, which is the coyotes.
Yeah, so the recommended dates, we have a training that explains this for when you're hunting coyotes, but December to June is the recommendation because as we've talked about in a couple other RAC meetings, that the pelts for trappers and stuff is best in like the December to February-ish time. But obviously fawning happens in June, and so you want it to be in a time when the coyotes have formed their pair bonds but haven't raised their pups yet because they disperse in the fall and everything. And so we do recommend the December to June is the best time, but then there's also a study by Brock and Kent-Hersey and them on the Monroe Mountain that I mentioned earlier. They pointed out that targeted take over time, even if it's in different times of the year, that it'll still be effective because coyotes are pretty territorial. And so if you're killing coyotes in the area that fawning occurs in a targeted time that's repetitive, like repeated over time, then you're still helping those fawning areas. And it does take about 6 months for once coyotes are removed for others to come in. So that December, more January to June does cover that 6 month before fawning.
That percentage of non-habitat to crucial, how does that relate to actual available habitat percentage? Like, is it just way more, like, is the pressure the same in both? That's what I'm trying to say, in the crucial habitat versus, because it could just be we have a ton of non-habitat, so that's why that percentage is so high. So how does it relate to the actual available habitat percentage?
That is a good question, and I could run the numbers, but I don't have those in front of me right now.
It could be that we are putting more pressure on coyotes and deer habitat just because we have a similar number or a higher number relative to what's available.
Yeah, I can make a note to look into that and get back to you on that.
You're talking deer habitat versus jaguar habitat, non versus a substantial. The coyotes, they'll eat anything. I live off of Calmanor.
There isn't any non-habitat for coyotes, I think what Berlin is saying.
Yeah, coyotes are very adaptable for sure.
Devri, quick, does it say in the rule that you have to take this coyote by trapping or shooting, or can people turn in roadkill coyotes, or like literally any coyote they find?
There is a specific roadkill option. The rule specifies that you need to be the one to kill it yourself, so if you hit the coyote, you can submit the roadkill.
Order a new brush fire. And under the new rule, all that someone has to present now, they do the app stuff, they tag it, but they just present the bottom jaw. Is that all they present under this recommendation?
Yeah, so we ask for the jaw so we can get the tooth for age data, and also just to verify it's similar to bobcats that you have the jaw submission. And this request came to remove the ear and pelt submission, because if you want to use the coyote pelt for selling or other reasons, that it preserves the quality of the pelt, you don't have to snip the ears. So that was the idea behind that change.
So bring the jaw, you pull the tooth, you mark it. I mean, do I get the jaw back, or I just give the jaw?
If you would like the jaw back, you can.
Okay.
If we can pull both premolar teeth, so there's just the small behind the canine. And if we pull both of those, then that's evidence that we've checked it in. And so if you bring it to another biologist and those teeth are gone and you can tell they've been pulled, then it prevents duplicate submission.
Have we done anything with the check-in process? It used to be a little bit of a pain in division offices I went to, like, we don't have anybody here to check them right now, or we don't want to deal with that sticky coyote. Like, is that pretty streamlined? Can you check them in anytime? Do you make an appointment?
So we have check-in times and locations on our website, and next to each of them, it has a phone number for the specific biologist or the specific region, and it asks that you call ahead to set an appointment. So there will be like a specific day and then these hours on the day. Then we still ask that you call for an appointment so we can spread you out so you're not waiting in line for hours. And it seems to work pretty well. People are pretty good about calling ahead, even if they're first time. I get a lot of people calling me with their first time, like, this is my first coyote, and they still are aware of calling in and checking in. So.
Bart, you had a question?
Yes. A couple questions. First one, so you want to incentivize taking or killing more coyotes. And I know a couple of years ago, we went through this as well. And one of the issues that came up was compensatory reproductive response by coyotes when you start to having more take. Are we considering that at all in this, or is it, I mean, because it was considered an issue 2-3 years ago. Is it not considered an issue anymore?
That's a great question. There is research on both sides of this. So targeted coyote killing can reduce numbers and help fawns, but then if you have general coyote take, there will be the compensatory growth. And that's why we're incentivizing the targeted take, because it shows over time, if you're taking the coyotes in the same areas, it can have a beneficial effect without leading to the compensatory growth. So yeah, they're actually considering that as well, that if the targeted approach isn't working, that there is research that shows the coyotes can realize there's more space and start growing more. There was a paper that was in this year that was posted about this issue, and it was nationwide. There weren't very good representation of the Utah sites. There was, I think, a couple in southern Utah and a couple in northern Utah. And it said that hunting doesn't necessarily decrease coyotes, but you have to compare that to the study of Brock that was in Monroe and specific to Utah, where it was targeted looking at fawning areas. And so there is research on both sides, and it should be taken into consideration, which is why we're recommending more targeted approach.
Okay, another question. When I look at the heat map for coyote kill densities, which is in the Utah's predator control manual plan you had, and it really looks like that most of the take is in the populated around the cities along the 15 and in the major populated areas in the state. So is there really, it seems like there's more correlation between coyote take or coyote killing around population centers and not necessarily have anything to do with deer habitat. So are you really just going to incentivize more take or more killing of coyotes in these areas that are already being killed, i.e. around population centers?
So there, we still have the $50 as the division's recommendation is to maintain the $50 across the state in addition to the $75 within the crucial habitat. And there are side benefits of this program for agriculture producers or just protecting our dogs and small children and whatever. And I think it's natural to have more take where areas where people live, as people talk about with the price of coyotes not necessarily incentivizing you to spend hundreds of dollars hiking to remote locations.
I think it's I personally think this is a perverse incentive, but I'll save that for the comment section.
Any questions from the public?
I'd like to ask you one question on that app. You know, I kill quite a few coyotes and I really get frustrated when it's 10 below zero and I'm up there and I want to get to my set, check it, take the coyote out, get out of there as quick as I can. So I'm not leaving a whole bunch of scent there. But I'm sitting there, my fingers are frozen. I'm trying to hit those little tiny targets on my phone, typing in my name and my address and male, female, birth date, and really the method for a guy that's got fairly average size fingers. These guys that's got real big ones, it needs to be worse. But for getting that date in there, it's almost impossible, especially when your fingers are cold. And anyway, I'm trying to hurry to get out of the area, so maybe I can catch another coyote there sometime. But anyway, it would be so much easier if you could just put in your COR number or something like that. I mean, we can apply for permits and everything else by just putting that in. We don't have to type in our birth date or address or sex and all that other stuff. I mean, we could just type in that number. And to me, I can't imagine with the technology we have today that you couldn't have an app that you could just put that in. It brings up all your information. So all you have to do is put in whether the coyote was male or female, method of take, and it's already got the date there for you. And just hit enter and get the heck out of there. You could simplify it because they've had 2 or 3 versions in the last few years and they've all been a pain in the neck. And this one's even a little worse, I think, in my opinion, just because of, the little, what reminds me of a little slot machine when that thing starts spinning there. And I'm trying to catch it, and I have to go back quite a long time to get to my birthday. So anyway, I think you could make it a lot easier and more user-friendly is all I'm trying to say.
So use the customer ID number to self-populate the rest of the, that's
right.
Probably something we could look into.
Yeah. There also is an option in the app, and I can show you after the meeting if you'd like. You can set as favorite answers, and so you fill in all of your information and hit this little star, and then going forward, it'll populate all of that stuff. You just have to make sure to do that before you enter.
We already have it. You just didn't know about it.
I should have got one of my grandkids to tell me.
I admit it's harder to find. You just.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we can also look into the customer ID thing as well.
So is that the Survey 123 app that you're talking about, or is it from?
Yeah.
Any other questions? Lynn?
So just a quick one on what he's talking about. I haven't bountied a coyote to the state of Utah for 4 or 5 years. It's easier for me to go over and bounty it at our county for $20. Just because of all the hassle, the crap, it's not worth the effort to me. But going back to talking about your critical habitat, your critical all that. I used to run sheep on Monroe Mountain, so I'm a little bit familiar with whatever. But so when you're coming up with these critical habitat, what's the average elevation that you're looking at? Where are you wanting these people to go kill these coyotes? And I understand that you go kill the coyotes, that breeding pair out. I mean, I get all that. I understand all of that. But the money you're wanting to pay them extra isn't possible for them to go up on top of Signal Peak and kill coyotes.
Vance, do you want to talk to where it is on the Monroe?
Sure. Yeah, Monroe is quite different than like out on the West Desert as far as your percentage that's in non-deer habitat versus here. But it's a pretty thin band around Monroe that would be considered non-crucial habitat for wildlife, just really thin band.
But the fawning area is Big Lake.
It's hard to get to in the winter.
Yes, that's what my point is. You can't get there
It's tough.
to target them. What's the gross amount of coyotes that are harvested? What's the timeline when most of them are taken?
It's typically, I can pull up the one for southern region. It's typically during the winter months. So from this past year in the southern region, there was, and this is December of 23, because we haven't finished. There was 137 in December, 106 in January, 46 in February, and then after that, the next highest months were like 52 in April, and then 64 in July, 68 October. So it's mostly those ones.
A lot of those later ones are pups being turned in. People found in and killed the pups and turned into pups. So that's really not a real true figure. I mean, it's harvested coyotes, but it's not harvested adult coyotes, correct? I mean, you won't have no way to know that, but I'm telling you that that's how it is. But I'm not a biologist. I'm a sweet corn salesman.
So again, though, we're trying to encourage coyote harvest in the upper elevation fawning grounds of mule deer, and so that would sometimes necessitate going up in the summer months and harvesting.
But you're gonna have a hard time getting people to participate then. I guess that's my point.
Yeah.
And so,
especially during trapping season.
Yeah, because we're gonna trap $50 bobcats.
Right.
Can I comment one more time on some of that? You know, one of my big passions is killing coyotes. So anyway, I kind of know a little bit about them, but coyotes come down out of that high country just like the deer do. When the snow gets 4 feet deep, and coyotes don't stay up there in that snow. There's nothing there for them to eat. They can't get around, so they move down into that lower country, the same country the deer winter in. And, and I'm killing them coyotes from November to February. And really it's the same coyotes that's going to be moving back up there with the deer and killing them. They're killing them fawns when they have them. It drives me crazy when I read some of this stuff. I mean, I agree to a certain extent, but really the coyotes aren't up there in 8 or 9 or 9,000 or to 10,000 feet, usually, in the middle of winter. And some of those deer go back up there and that's where they have their fawns at. But another thing I wanted to mention too, back before the big deer population crash, there was resident deer populations on the East Desert, a lot more out on the West Desert, a lot of places that there isn't any deer now. And, do you think there's a possibility some of those deer could come back if there wasn't predators waiting for them to eat them as soon as they get there?
There has been conversation about that. And I know if people catch a coyote, they're not going to want to collar it as much as they want to kill it. But I would love for more coyote data so we can look at more of that. But I feel like that's right now.
Some of the Monroe collar data show that at least the older ones didn't move. They stayed all year round. I don't know if that's just
one elevation.
The Monroe.
Yeah. But believe it or not, it showed when we radio collared the coyotes on Monroe.
I don't think that's true across the board. And when UDAP flies, they give us some feedback. We flew up here in these flying ranges, there's no coyotes up here. They are down lower where the deer are, and then we haven't go down yet. So there's actually a couple things going on. There's this bounty program, which is sort of a general, let's do some general hunting across the board and get the public involved. And we also have a targeted program. We work directly with UDAP, and they're using thermal optics, and they're flying, and they're targeting very specific areas that our biologists define. So that's going on as well. So that might help you bear in mind.
Handful of it might be to say this. So the best bang for your buck's aerial gunning.
Yes.
Exactly. So for my earlier comment, the Southwest Desert seems completely left out of most of the conversation. It's 100 miles from everybody. So for a coyote hunter to get there, you're going to take a tank of gas. And there's very few deer. When you do see a doe, at least that I see, she usually doesn't have a fawn. That's either, to me, because she's not getting bred or the coyotes are getting fawn. And so when I look at the crucial critical areas, I don't believe there's any in the Southwest Desert unless it's just very little right on the beach. And so I guess that's why I suggested we increase that bounty a little bit. Maybe we could do it specific to the Southwest Desert, increase the fee there, because those deer need some help. And there's plenty of deer there, I believe, if you could get rid of the predators and the horses, if you will, and allow them what they have. But anyway, just
I second that. Not quite there yet.
Yeah, and as a rep, you definitely can have specific recommendations that you'd like to pass on to the wildlife board.
Thank you. Kevin, public comment.
We had one strongly agree.
Yes. You didn't pick neutral.
Didn't pick neutral.
All right.
And there was a comment there was a written comment and it had to do with focusing more on increasing the bounty even higher than the $75 in crucial areas was the comment that was written online. So.
Thank you. Public comment, one comment card. Kelly, do you have any other comments?
You know, I think I used up all my wisdom.
We appreciate your wisdom. Thank you. Okay, RAC discussion.
We've heard some ideas from you, Russ.
My personal ideas.
Well, I'm with this guy over here. You'd rather go to the county and get 20 than to go through the rigmarole and get 50, so.
What about 75? That's what we're hoping for.
I'll go get 100, but I still probably wouldn't do it. I get more satisfaction seeing the dead sucker.
If my comments, I wanted to share, if you haven't used the new roadkill app, it's like the funnest thing to do on long road trips. Now, my kids absolutely love it, right? Because now you're looking over the next hill to see what's dead. And the app actually works quite well. I have dozens and dozens of submissions every time I drive somewhere, right? Is that a raccoon? Is that a badger? Is that? I feel like that app, a totally different system, I know, but something more along those lines where it's literally pre-populated. Is it a mule deer? How confident are you? Is it a male or female? Geotag it, drop the pin, and it's done. It's gone with my information submitted. We need to try to get the app to be as simple as possible. Those are my comments, and I know, I'll keep trying, but right now I already have 4 apps on my phone that are just the state of Utah. And that's a lot compared to other states when you add all the other states. I personally feel that 75 is not enough. And that budgets are meant to be broken. Christmas season, we all know that. Whether any industry you're in, you're supposed to break the budget, and I think this is a positive break of the budget if we break it. If we run out of money, it just incentivizes people to try sooner, earlier, whatever for the next year. So I would say 50 everywhere is fine, but I think it needs to be 100 in the crucial. People are going to take the path of the least resistance. You can find a den out on the desert where there's never been a mule deer ever. Like, that's the easiest way to make $200. But I want to force those guys to go up on the mountain and to call a smart coyote or whatever. It's worth a little more money. I think if that's what we're going to do, we should incentivize it a little more. It's been $50 since the beginning when inflation has gone up substantially. So
Bart has a comment.
Bart, you got a comment?
Then I'll go.
Yeah, so I don't think it was a death, but people talk about how they would rather just turn the pelt in to the county and get paid $20 from the county instead of the state. So is that heat map that they produced showing kill density, does that incorporate county data or is it just state data? Because if it doesn't incorporate county data, then it's a wrong map. And secondly, if the DNR isn't incorporating county data into their decision making, then they're doing it wrong because they're actually not accurately reflecting the amount of coyotes that are being taken. So they don't know what they're talking about. So it would be nice if somebody in the DNR could say if they use or don't use county data for reporting total kills of coyotes?
We only use what's reported in the app, so I can reach out to the counties and try to incorporate that data, but we use the data that we have with verified payments and location data just to try and.
Yeah, so I mean,
Bart, the problem with the county data is it's not geo-referenced, so it would not contribute to the heat map because they don't require you to give a location.
Right, and the intent of the report is to report on this program specifically. We do a separate survey where we ask for coyote take overall. So we do have numbers that of coyotes that are taken by county, I think it's by county, that aren't bounties. So we do have a feel for, at least countywide, what the difference is between what's turned in and what people are taking. There are a fair number of people that aren't bountying them for various reasons. So we do ask about that.
so there is some, it sounds like there are some data deficiencies.
Bart, I'll just answer there. I mean, a coyote is a non-managed, non-protected species, so I mean, I personally have found a lot of coyotes that I would never even go hike over there to see what they look like, let alone cut the jaw off and take it somewhere. It's just.
Well, I mean, I guess I would say that if we're talking about budgets, the flippant disregard for managing to a budget that was expressed earlier isn't really what I think we should be doing in Utah. And it's not I don't think it's necessarily the appropriate use of government dollars, especially if, I know it's funny and everyone likes to laugh about it because they don't care about coyotes, but it's, it doesn't sound like this is a well-conceived plan if we don't truly have, I mean, we should be encouraging more county participation into our county reporting than us increasing state bounties if we really wanted to be good stewards of our resources and our financial resources. That's all I'll say on it.
Appreciate that, Bart. I feel like I have to respond because you threw me under the bus for my budget comment. I think for the budget, when I said it's meant to be broken, is because I see that as a loss, a failure on our part to not use the 500,000 because we didn't use it for 5 years in a row. Then we got our budget cut. So I don't want to sit 10 years from now and say, hey, we got 50 grand for coyotes. That's all we got left. I just don't want to see the program go away. That's why I say it needs to be maxed out. There's no reason it shouldn't be, in my opinion. That was all.
So we're creating a market as it is. And so it's naturally aligning itself at that lower number, which I guess isn't preferred by some people. And we're trying to get more money spent. I don't know. I just have issues with the whole thing in general, but that's my opinion.
Just to clarify, Bart, the objective of our recommendation is to try to focus coyote harvest into the areas that we think are going to benefit deer the most to make the program more effective. That's why we're recommending what we're recommending. Period.
And I mean, that's where I'm at with Austin is, you know, we need to make it a substantial amount. A year ago, I believe it was at the wildlife board meeting, Carl Albrecht promised the sportsman $100 bounty. And we're $25 from that. And I believe we're probably $25 from where it really ought to be on top of that in these crucial areas. Not to open the floodgates, but mountain coyote hunting is a lot different than hunting coyotes down in the desert floor where you can see them coming from a long ways. They don't have a substantial amount of broad area that they're going to try to wind you. You see them coming then when you're hunting deep drainages and across big long canyons when you're hunting coyotes in the mountains. I do agree we need to make that crucial area and focus some of these coyote hunters up into that higher elevation, but $75 isn't going to do it. We were promised 100. I believe we should at least go to 100 and possibly a little bit more than that. Let's get some people out in the fields. I mentioned a year ago that a thermal scope isn't $150. You know, you're $3,000 for these guys that are putting in that effort, and now they're buying $3 to $4 a gallon gas or diesel to get up there and do it. They're not gonna do it. It's not worth it to them. It's, you catch them here in the valley, take them to the county. It seems a little more effective. You know, we're in the 21st century. To simplify an app, it's very simple to make it to where we can get it into putting your hunt registration number in or whatever it needs to be. Make a login to where you open it, you take a picture, it geotabs where it's at. I work with data people all the time. Those guys are smart. They know how to do it. They just put in the stuff and make it work. So my consensus is on it. 75 isn't enough. I do agree with maybe making that margin between areas to force the coyote hunters up in those areas that they don't primarily go. Most of the coyote hunters will agree. They don't want to hunt these mountain coyotes. They're hard to hunt. They're easier to trap than they are to hunt because you draw them down these big canyons to trap them down in the valleys. And it puts them out of that crucial area, right? It really does. Yep. But when the does or the fawns are on the ground, that's when we need to target them and to get them gone. As explained to us earlier, they're primarily more susceptible under that pressure to go to reproduce, to target those fawns during that time. And you know, that's where I believe we need to go with it. But I think we need to make it $75 for me is a slap in the face. Like that's like, here's a little bit, a dangling carrot, go after it, but it's virtually not worth it for what most of the coyote hunters that are turning them in don't have $150 guns they're shooting. They don't go 50 miles from home and shoot a coyote. Those guys are passionate about what they do, and I think we need to reward them realistically and get to that number. If it completely blows out of the park, it blows out of the park. We knew we had a problem, and it took care of itself. It took 1 year. You'll manage them yourself. I don't believe that's going to happen. I don't believe if we went to $100 bounty, we're going to blow a $500,000 budget. I don't believe it's going to happen. It's going to take a couple years. People don't have thousands of dollars laying around right now to go outfit themselves with that kind of technology to go and make an extreme amount of money. And most of them get to that $600 cap and set the brakes because now you're paying the government back that money that you spent on them. So they're either going to go for broke and make $3,000-4,000 on them, or they're going to stop at $600 and quit trapping them, quit turning them in. So is that enough?
What if we said you can pay for your dedicated hunter hours with coyotes instead of cash?
Oh, now you're going down a slippery slope.
Any other comments?
How late do you want this meeting to go?
Yeah, really.
So you're on to something.
So I just have to pass on something Jim Brown said. Coming with Dr. Jim Brown, I thought over at the university, for 50 years. He testified in front of the Supreme Court when they were banning poisons, and he told them, he said, when there's two creatures left on the earth, there'll be coyotes, and one will eat the other. So he wasn't too worried about us wiping out coyotes. He was promoting that we should take care of them. So I just thought I should pass on his wisdom for 50 years of dealing with coyotes.
That really opens a can of worms when you talk about 1080.
Darren?
Yeah.
Could you help us understand where this money comes from? Exactly, I don't know.
Yeah, so,
on that.
so right now, again, most of the division's funding is from license sales, and we generate that with our programs. But we do get a block of money from the legislature. This general fund money is taxpayer money. And so right now, and then the legislature can authorize a spending limit on certain activities. So that's kind of how this falls out. So what they've authorized the division to do is spend up to $250,000 of that general fund block that we get each year towards this program.
Are you sure it's general fund and not the $5 on each?
It's general fund. The $5 that's mainly
So there's an
With
additional,
UDAF aerial controls.
in addition to that 200, that general fund, there's $5 out of every deer permit that's sold
Big
that go,
game.
big game permit that goes specifically to predator control, and that's where we partner with UDAF for aerial gunning and whatnot. So that 250 isn't the only money that's gone to predator control.
Well, there's also a certain amount each rancher
They hit us on every
pays
animal we sell, goes to
Right.
predators.
for sale, plus they send us a bill, how many cows you got, you need.
And that's,
Right, there's a head
that's
tax.
used by UDAF for livestock
That goes to
specific.
UDAF, that doesn't come to this.
No.
We work with UDAF and we're really happy with that partnership. And we try to work through all this stuff, and where we've got interest overlap, they work with us on our deer concerns, and we try to help producers, where they're having problems with wildlife. So that's kind of how that works. Does that clarify?
I'll just, my last comments here, I'll just say that, I mean, we're flirting with something that can be misconstrued as a negative light on hunting, right? There's a hierarchy of animals where we place them, and coyotes are pretty close to the bottom. Not to say they're not beautiful, neat animals, they are. But we have to be careful of that in all that we do. And I think a refresher, changing the program around, changing the app, increased fee is probably what we need. I feel like the program's got a little stagnant for most hunters, most sportsmen. So a refresher is good, but most of these have outlawed coyote calling competitions, and we're always flirting with that edge. And I think it's important to remember that we are taking a life, we are killing an animal, and this is why we're doing it. This is just very liberal size hunting, but I think that's important to remember in all our meetings, that it's still killing something. But I think we're ready for a motion.
Don't look at me, I can't make them.
I'm gonna take a stab at this and see if I can get it right. I'll make a motion, with the exception of, raising that permit or that, fee or payment, however you want to say it, at a minimum of $100, in those, crucial areas. The bounty.
So accept,
Leave the other.
Except,
as proposed, accept.
let's see.
To accept as presented, but increase the bounty payment to $100 in the areas identified as crucial. Is that,
We want to raise the
hold on, I'm thinking.
other one to 75.
Yeah, I think Berlin's got, let's go 75 on crucial areas, 100 on crucial areas.
okay, got it.
I would like to go more, but I don't think we're gonna get it more off, but I think at least a minimum of that, so.
Do we revisit this anymore? Or is this something that's, if we vote, it's for 3 years?
There's no time limit. Frankly, what I would suggest is that we make changes, however the board wants to do it, and then, let's keep an eye on it. See how things are going and where people are shifting and where we're at.
Yeah, this
Maybe
is
let it
on
run
on
for
a
a
set,
couple
on a
years.
set schedule. This is one that comes out as needed.
Okay, we have a motion for 175. The rest.
So the motion is to accept as presented, but increase the bounty payment to $100 in crucial deer habitat areas and $75 in non-crucial habitat.
Do we have a second? Second by Verlin. Any discussion on the motion?
Yeah, I kind of think taking 75 to the Southwest Desert, or well, the mountain Southwest Desert out in the middle of nowhere doesn't help our, what we're gunning for, doesn't help. I said, yeah, I help in eyebrow unit, but I don't, kind of getting back to what you were saying, it just seems like we're trying to wipe out coyotes in general. And I don't.
Well, and can you pick out the South Desert and not the Henry Mountains or?
Yeah, that's the hard part, is there's some
other best.
There's some good deer habitat out there too.
Area, yeah.
So you'd rather see the gap larger?
I'd just rather keep it 50 and 175.
Okay, we got a motion and a second.
And they're already on that like crazy.
And Berlin seconded his motion of 175. So we're ready for a vote. Yep. Rachel. Can you vote?
I'm gonna say yes.
Rachel says yes. Chuck?
Yes.
Mike? Yep. And Russ?
Yes.
Chad
and Riley have their hands up.
Chad, Riley, Brooklyn are yeses. Bart?
No.
Motion passes 8-1. Bart, would you like to speak any more to your no vote?
No, I've already made my point.
Appreciate that, Bart. Thank you. Okay, motion passes. Thank you, Devri. Appreciate it. Number 11, shut down or gathering recommendations with Rusty. Rusty, you reconvene your committee?
Yeah, yep, last spring, we took some shed antler gathering recommendations around. One of those recommendations was to establish a non-resident shed hunting season that began May 1st. As we asked the board asked us to reconvene the shed antler committee, revisit that topic, and with the sentiment of the resident, non-resident seasons should really match and align so that we're not treating non-residents differently. And so we reconvened the committee. There's a lot of discussion, not just that, about a lot of things, but the one thing the committee agreed strongly on is that they still didn't want a resident shed hunting season, but they couldn't get consensus on the non-resident season. They revisited the topic, talked about everything from multiple reciprocity strategies where different states have different opening dates depending on the opening dates in their home state, and a bunch of different strategies. And in the end, the committee felt strongly about not having a resident season, but couldn't get consensus on the non-resident season, but agreed that they would rather have no season on non-residents than to have any season on residents, if that makes sense. And so if we really want to align, they were okay with that. But priority one was not to have a resident season. So that's kind of where we landed. I didn't know how to verbalize that recommendation other than just no season for anybody at this time. And we'll continue the DWR will track, non-residents if that trend is going up or changing at all. And so, yeah, with that, Chuck mentioned 55 gallons of 55 gallons of donuts earlier. So it made me really hungry after that. So I'm happy to answer questions and move on.
So I do have a question. So we're not going to limit anybody from Antler collecting, but we do have the ability to do emergency closures.
Correct.
Can you remind us what would kick off that emergency closure?
Yes. So that's one of the changes we made last year when we took this around, and that was that the emergency closure would be tied to get our emergency feeding plan. And so if the conditions were bad enough to trigger emergency winter feeding for mule deer, then they would be bad enough to shut down shed hunting. So it wouldn't be an arbitrary director decision or something like that.
Any other questions?
So I haven't ever seen you feed any mule deer over where I'm from, other than the ones we feed in our haystacks. So is that going to be an area by area thing? Or
that was part of it, is that it would be statewide, and the reason being when it was shut down in, I believe that was 2017 or 18, that winter. It was originally just the north, and then we heard from southern Utah that, hey, everybody's coming down here to shed hunt. We're getting inundated. And so we just said, you know, if we're gonna shut it down, let's shut it down statewide and not have people getting overrun.
So if they feed anywhere, shuts it down.
But you're still welcome to feed deer out of the haystack.
Takes mine out, I guess. Okay, so that doesn't count up there. Northern Utah, where they feed them anyway, does it? What's he told me? Ranch up there.
Harbor Ranch, no, it doesn't include Harbor Ranch.
That's an emergency. So I've voiced this before and I am doing it. I would like to see an April 1st start to shed season for two reasons. One is the shed hunters get on the roads that the cattlemen and everybody go, and they just tear them up on their money. And the horns are still on the animals' heads. And plus they harass the animals. So to me, it just makes sense to start it when the horns are on the ground and the ground's more solid. So I know we're not going to get that, but I just say my piece. Vernon said his, I said mine.
I got some more on that one. Are we commenting?
No, we're not quite commenting yet, but it's a good question.
I mean, you know, so why are we tearing the countryside?
That was a question.
Why are we?
Sounds like. Oh, you want me to answer?
Any other questions from the RAC? Questions from the public? We have public comment on this one. Kevin?
Yes, there was one, and it was strongly in favor of not having
no seasons.
No seasons. Yes.
Essentially, this recommendation is no further action.
Correct. This would be status quo. When the board voted this spring, it was to let's not have a season for anybody till we figure this out. And so this recommendation is to keep it how it is currently.
Quick question, if that was the time. Was there any data when we had those shed closures on the displacement of those deer and elk and their health, overall health condition that we conducted when we did this, you know, their surveying, or did we miss that time frame? Was there any difference in a shed season versus no shed season?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's not a lot of data anywhere on this. Utah probably has the most data on it, and it's one published study. I think the second one might have been published, and then kind of some just looking at some data. But during the shed committee about a year ago, we asked Brock McMillan at BYU to look at some collar data. During the closure, so we had them look the day before shed season opened, and then the day it opened.
See if they ran across the mountain.
Mm-hmm. And then he also looked at a week before and a week after, to see if maybe those effects level out or whatever. And in both comparisons, there wasn't a statistical difference in the distance moved by individual deer. He looked at about 1,000 deer, and so that's a big scale, right? That's statewide. We all know that as shed hunters, we have the ability to bump deer over the hill. What we don't know is whether or not that translates to lower survival rates. Is that enough to tip deers over? Tip deer over. And maybe in a really bad winter when they're already nutritionally stressed, we're not saying it doesn't have an effect, but we also have that emergency closure in place, if it is really bad, just to be on the safe side. So yeah, the other place we have data is Antelope Island, and that's more your really extreme opening day type scenario when you have no shed hunting, then all of a sudden you've got 100 people running around in a very relatively small area. And there we saw about a third of the animals stayed put, about a third displaced a little bit, but still stayed in their core home range, and about another third left their home range. And so certainly with that much pressure, there's the ability to displace animals. And again, we don't know if that translates to lower survival or not, but those are the data that we have.
It just seems like you would want, like, Ben's just did his, I believe, capturing and fat study on how the deer looked on the Monroe specifically. And if he said, holy cow, they're at 7% fat this year, that's our average. One might say, holy moly, this might be a year that we don't push them around in February, March, because they are in bad shape. That was my questioning. And if you
Yeah, no, that's a good point, yeah.
that might, to me, be a indicator more so than even am I feeding the deer. Holy cow, the San Juan years ago was at 7% fat. It was the lowest in the state. That would be a good year to say, can we please leave these deer alone for 3 months? They need it.
Yeah. And that's a great point. It's not just winter that
we're not guessing it. We got the fat. We got it.
Yeah. It's not just the winter that impacts the body condition. So that's a great point.
And Rusty, that emergency lever is the director's lever, is it not? To pull, or who does that?
It's tied to the winter feeding. And so in the winter feeding plan, there's certain triggers that would have to be met to initiate winter feeding. And so yeah, it's used to be more of a director lever. Now it's tied to the feeding plan and it's more objective.
Okay. Sounds good. I don't have any public comment cards on this. So.
Time went out.
Give us your comments.
I agree with Russ. It's aggravating when you're going up the mountain with the cows and there's big ruts in the road, you know, and what goes on during those shed hunting season, which people tearing the road up, trying to be up there. And I look back, I actually live with an avid shed hunter, but when we had the closed season, the only ones that wasn't out hunting sheds were the ones that didn't believe in breaking the law. And when the day turned that they could go out, there wasn't any sheds left. There were big old footprints there, and, you know, it's really made life kind of miserable in my house for a while. It's I'm very glad to see that there's no season and that I like this recommendation a lot. So I don't know what we can do about these guys that get out in the mud and tear things up and even ride off-road on their four-wheelers and even helicopters and planes spotting them, different things that happen. But anyway, I like this recommendation of no season, and I don't see how you could make a season for out of state and not for the in-state. But yeah, I'm in favor of this recommendation.
It almost sounded like a motion.
It's kind of what I see.
For a second.
I just, land management agency, and I should be BLMC this week. I know you can't lock up the forest of the BLM or the public land, so you're not gonna use this, but the fact is shed hunters are a big major proportion in the spring, the guys, and they do tear up the forest service to tear up the BLM land. A mess, and there's no doubt about that. I think they're up there sometimes too early, and my gut feeling is that there probably is some negative impacts to wildlife, to deal when you're especially in the winter 22 and 23, you got here hit the middle of natural causes, and then you can go out chase them just a little bit, and that probably is. I would love to have a season. I think when we say we're going to manage for the bad guys and not have a season because they're bad, I don't think you should do that. I think you manage what you're supposed to do and do think you're right. And not manage for that 10% or 20% they're going to break the law. And if we start doing that, we're going to slip the slope. The Forest Service, I would love to see. I would love to see a date.
Well, another thing to that is by the time they tear up the road, and by the time the Forest Service 2 or 3 years later, it's a road.
Like we have a budget for roads.
Yeah, I know.
Appreciate your presentation, Rusty. I think it's, there's a world coming soon that I'm scared of, where everything we do outside has to be drawn in a lottery draw, and that's scary to me. Just to even go outside and look at birds, we're gonna have to draw a permit. I mean, it's scary. So any way we can keep permits and licensing and seasons away from it, I'm in support of generally, and I know you have to pay the consequences, but let's let people enjoy what they can. And some people are never going to get to hunt in Utah, and all you can do is look for calcified antler on the ground, and that's okay.
Yeah, and you know, with the comment from JJ, I agree. I think we should look at a little bit more with that. You know, and if everybody's done comment, I'll make the motion. You know, I would like to see it presented as present, but I look at not just the closure of honest, if we have to get to that point where we're feeding them, the whole state at some point is detrimental with snowfall, with feed, and that all that aspect is, we need to look at them across the board, our elk and our deer herds both, not just deer. If that fat percentage is down, I believe we're not going to keep everybody off, but you're going to keep the honest guy off, and we're going to get a little kickback from it. There's not enough law enforcement agencies around to keep the people out of there, but I believe that most of the honest people are going to stay back. I watch that. I live in the foothills in Annabella. I literally watch those guys come in the dark, leave in the dark, show up early in the morning. You can only keep so many people out, but it might construe some of the people from, you know, the people that actually care about the animals, not the antlers. And I agree, there's quite a substantial amount of money in it, but you know, people that care about the animals, most of the sportsmen are going to stay out. The people that are going to break the law, they're going to break the law. That's the fact of the matter is. So my motion, Kevin, did you get my motion, all that down?
There was a motion.
Let me read it.
Okay.
You tell me.
Okay.
To approve as presented, but in addition to feeding being a trigger, to add a trigger associated with winter deer fat condition measured during the winter captures.
Perfect. Okay, we got a motion. Do we have a second? Russ seconds that.
So can I ask a question?
Question on the motion.
I mean, is that realistic to answer? Is that realistic to get?
Well, that could, I think that could be put into the mix. Don't you think?
I just didn't know if we collected that and had that data available soon enough to make the difference.
Yeah, I don't know where we put that other than the emergency winter feeding plan. We could maybe open that rule again or something if that's something the board wants to do. The other thing is we don't capture on every unit every year. You got to kind of have surrogate units that represent nearby units.
It's something we could try to figure out, but it's not going to be really specific to every unit. We just don't have that level of data.
So I would wonder if we just want, instead of saying you have to do it, to consider and make a recommendation that they look at that.
Looks to me like if you put that in there, and I agree that's a major thing, but there's probably a unit somewhere in Utah that's got that problem going on. And if you're gonna close the whole state when you start feeding deer, so if you've got a deer herd that's less than 7% fat, I mean, you just well be closed all the time and go to a season deal. So I think that's what you'll end up if you stick right to that kind of a rule. So
I think your motion said to look at it.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, to look at it.
I think
See, there's a lot of variables, right? We've discussed a lot of these variables. That's why I would like maybe to have it looked at. Is it something possible that we can do with those studies to see if the Monroe's struggling, the Fish Lake's struggling. If the Uinta's struggling, the Wasatch's struggling, right? Coinciding with certain units and certain The desert Southwest is a little different animal. But, so it's hard to justify what you shut down, what you don't shut down. I get the whole statewide thing, but I think it's something that we could look at and maybe, and get something out of it. If nothing comes out of it, nothing comes out of it. But, we're all about studies right now. We want to get enough stuff on the ground that we can see. This might be one of them. We might be pushing them right to the bitter end, and you might see one year that maybe the mortality rate on fawn birth or whatever they call it, stillborns is a lot bigger that year. You know, when you're pushing them 3 months in the spring, pushing them that hard, but the stillborns are happening. I don't know. That's why I asked the question.
So do you want me to add that to the motion?
The motion.
So let me,
Okay.
this is what I, based on this conversation.
Sorry,
Tell me if I've captured it. To approve as presented, but in addition to the deer feeding closure trigger, evaluate the feasibility of adding a trigger associated with deer fat condition, the deer fat / condition measured during winter captures.
Fair statement. Yep.
Okay, we're ready to go.
So that, hold on. So the motion was by Mike. Do we have a second?
Yes, Russ.
Okay.
All those in favor of the motion here in the room? Online? Unanimous online. Okay, so I got a vote of 8-1. Erlen, you want care to speak? Your no vote. You'd rather see a season?
I think, you know, the last RAC, one of the last ones we talked about these studies, and that it was brought up that you can pretty much do a study and make it say what you want, basically however you interpret it. I think we're getting too technical. Unless you're gonna close one unit, which we've talked about, north versus south, push everybody somewhere else. Maybe that's what you want to do. Anyway, I just think we're getting too deep into the mud.
Okay. Thanks for that.
The mud on the roads during April when.
Yeah.
Okay, motion passes 8-1. Thanks, Rusty. Save the best for last. Jason Robinson, agenda item number 12, West Desert Complex Deer and Elk Management Plan. Speak to us. Welcome.
Nothing to add. I think the presentation covered everything. So no adjustments or anything like that. So I'm here to answer questions.
Thank you. Questions for Jason? All right, I have a question. West Desert Deep Creek elk. You said we're not including the ghost shoots.
Correct.
Their land. Is that in the herd objective? In the objective, what are you not including? You were saying, was it 200 elk on West Desert Deep Creek?
So the tribal lands have their own, basically their own herd of elk that's significantly higher than the 200. So the 200 is basically Utah public land. It includes private land, but not on reservation land. And then we're also not proposing any kind of a change to the management boundary as well. So basically just keeping it status quo as it currently is.
West Desert Deep Creek. Okay. And what's the relationship with ghost shoot? Because right now, like, is it like the Ute side over there? Do we have a much better working relationship over there? Like, is there no relationship?
No, we have a relationship with them. There's a member on the RAC, the Central Region RAC. We have been having pretty regular meetings with them on elk mostly, but other topics as well, sage grouse, field deer, those kind of things. So there is an open line of communication. We're working with them, and the proposal, even this proposal, the Ghost Shoot Tribe was invited to participate in this process of the management plan. And so, yes, we talk with them pretty regularly.
Very good.
I have a question.
Of course you can.
So the elk that come off the reservation on the Nevada side into Utah and back, do you count those in your numbers or how's that? I'm very aware of that.
Yeah, so it's very complicated. The elk
Yeah.
understand where Nevada is and the tribal land and where Utah land are. So we do fly those areas every 3 years, just like we do other elk units. And so we do know on one day they might be in Nevada or on tribal lands. And so when we do those flights, we stick to the Utah portion and count those elk there, knowing that there are more elk in that mountain range than we count. But we do not have management authority in Nevada or on tribal lands. And we understand that, and we work with those different groups the best we can.
So the elk you count out of these 200 on the Utah side, do they go down to winter on the res or do they go east, go the other way?
They,
Is that tough to say?
yeah, so desert elk are different, right? They do different things depending on snowfall. And so a lot of the time we'll fly in the winter. The bulls generally seem to be right on tribal boundary. So sometimes they're on BLM, sometimes they're on tribe. The cows kind of get in these big groups, and depending on the day, they can be on Utah 100, 200 elk, or they can be across the border. But there's usually enough groups of elk that we generally, when we fly, we're right around that 200, knowing again that there could be 400 elk just literally a mile away in Nevada.
I'm curious how the Oquirrh-Stansbury split, like those have been together for a while, now splitting those, mainly talking about deer. How are the local hunters and everybody receiving that idea of splitting those two mountains? It makes sense to me on a map, but does it make logical sense for those that live and hunt there?
So like any topic, there's people for and against it. I think the majority of hunters out there are okay with it, especially when we look at, present some of the data. It was actually originally the idea that a group of sportsmen presented to the division years ago. So we've actually been collecting data on this for a number of years, and to look to see if this is what we would want to do in the future. So yes, there are folks that are possibly opposed. Definitely folks that hunt both mountains. But I think when we talk through it, I've talked to a number of hunters, and when I get done talking, I feel like most of them understand why we're doing it and feel like the benefits of the long-term management will be beneficial to them as a hunter, even though they do have to pick, a mountain to hunt. And most of that's just, as outlined in the presentation, hunters understand that the Oquirrhs and the Stansburys are very, very different mountain range. They're next to each other, but precipitation is very different on the two mountains. Land ownership is very different. And so I think hunters understand that. And so it makes sense to them. And we went through the central region RAC and it passed there. So yes, I have talked to hunters, but it seems like the folks that I've talked to are okay with it.
Thank you. Any other questions? Questions from the public? Bart's got a question. Go ahead, Bart.
Sorry, I did not. I forgot to lower my hand last vote.
He's still in favor of your motion. Okay. Thanks, Bart. All right, summarized public comment, Kevin?
You're not gonna get any help. It's one person that was neutral.
It probably doesn't live in Tooele. All right, no public comment. Cards on this one. So open it up to RAC discussion. Any discussions or opinions? It's a giant swath of land.
It is huge.
It's a substantial portion of Utah.
From Oquirrh Peak, looking either direction, it's a long ways. I've been there.
You can't look very far west from Ibach.
Well, no.
You can stay in Utah though.
Yes, yes. It's right there.
It's an awesome place.
Yes, it is.
Thanks, Jason. Do we have any motions or Anything needs to be changed or suggested?
I, for one, am excited to see the caller data being used to make changes like this. I think that's the most encouraging part for me watching the presentation. Like, oh, this line that we made years ago actually doesn't make sense. So let's change it. So kudos to the division for making changes. Yeah. So appreciate that. But I can't make a motion.
Mike keeps making motions, I'll make a motion.
Thank you.
Okay, Chuck, propose that we accept as presented. Sure, take the easiest one.
Yep.
I'll second.
Motion by Chuck, presented, accept as presented. Second by Mike. All those in favor? Unanimous in the room and online. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, unanimous. Thank you. Motion passes. Agenda number 12 is done. Appreciate everybody for coming tonight. Couple quick announcements before we motion to adjourn. We have, so this board meeting will be January 9th, 9 a.m. in Farmington Bay, where final decisions will be made. The next RAC meeting will be Southern Region at SUU, April 15th, tax day. So be there, and that'll be permit recommendations, all that good stuff. So that'll be the next RAC meeting. I wish you all a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Be safe, have fun, shoot some coyotes, and go to the board meeting. So.
Rusty's gonna bring a super pack on.
That's right. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Motion second. Second, and we're out.